The story begins with the MC seeing a wyvern flying in circles. It was the freest wyvern he had ever seen, and it was reason enough for him to be surprised since it was a giant being hovering through the skies. He decides to retire as a mercenary for a single major reason. Sometime later, he is holding a mage with his power and questions whether he had been hiding abilities, since it is definitely not the kind of power a mere mercenary should have. Aster laughs at that and, grabbing something from his back, asks if that book is a grimoire. The man starts sweating cold but answers yes, and asks if he really thinks the entire army appeared there just to kill a hunting dog. The MC calls them trash just like everyone from the Declan house. He then gets straight to the point and asks how the devil expelled that book, but the guy only answers that he doesn't know. He finds it strange, since a greedy clan like the Declan clan wouldn't bury something like that in a basement, and even with the guy not knowing how to use it, they still chased him because of a book. And because of that, he believes it must be very valuable. The man once again orders him to hand over the grimoire, making it clear that he could beg the leader for mercy and might even return to being a mercenary. However, the MC only smiles and questions what kind of power the mercenary manager has to make that happen, and then asks him to say his last words. At that moment, someone arrives on the battlefield, leaving the MC completely startled by the sinister aura he just felt. The man approaching praises the MC's great instincts and introduces himself as the leader of the magical Declan house of the Eastern continent, and, having said that, wants him to hand over the grimoire so they can talk afterward. Aster doesn't hide his surprise since he has been a mercenary for more than a decade and spent half his life working for the Declan house. But it is the first time he sees the leader in person. The Declan family is the strongest magical family on the Eastern continent, and its leader is said to be the strongest mage in history, and because of that, he doesn't know what kind of man this mage might be. However, he doesn't give a damn and tells him to go to hell. The leader can't believe what he just heard, but the MC questions if he really thinks he will take someone else's hard-earned reward, since that makes him a very shameless being. Farron gives a smile and starts laughing in the middle of the battlefield. Aster tries not to show fear, but deep down, feels that he shouldn't have seen the wyvern flying over the place. And to make things worse, the damn leader of the Declan showed up, and unfortunately, he knows the aura he felt wasn't a joke, and he is definitely the strongest mage he has ever seen. Farron admits it would be much easier to kill him and take the grimoire afterward, but asks him to return under the wings of the Declan, since if he hands over the grimoire, he will turn a blind eye to everything he has done. The MC doesn't respond, and the leader says again that the talent he witnessed is memorable, since after watching the fight, he still can't believe he didn't notice before, and guarantees that with that level of ability, he could go far if he had the support of the Declan house. However, after a lot of chatter, the MC says he agrees, and states that he has one condition. If he gives him the position of leader, he might consider it. Farron gets irritated hearing that, but the MC simply tightens his fist and strangles his prisoner even more, until finally killing him. The family leader gets irritated and laments the direction everything is taking, and makes it clear that he will probably die. The MC knows these are not empty threats, and when preparing, he charges with everything, landing a full punch that is blocked by a powerful barrier. He yells that it's impossible to know whether something is big or small unless it begins, and Farron answers that apparently he will have to put a collar on the dog. Then, activating his magic, he throws the MC far away. He raises his hand, and another magic circle appears, putting even more pressure on Aster, since everything around him starts being destroyed, and he finally understands how powerful the leader of the Declan is, since he can't find a single opening. In the middle of these thoughts, he is struck by a barrier. Farron says that there are things one does not even need to measure to know, and, activating another magic circle once again, says that the difference between them is colossal. Then, a gigantic explosion is caused on the battlefield. The leader, unharmed behind his barrier, says that he did not kill Aster since he only wanted to injure him, and asks if he is ready to talk. The MC, amidst the smoke, asks if by lowering his head and agreeing to return to the shadows of the Declans, everything would be forgiven. The leader responds that it is not simple to believe that, at this moment, Aster appears and, even wounded, points his finger and activates his magic since he is tired of eating dog food. In the next second, he fires a devastating blast of power and excitedly says that just because the collar is shiny and the house is big, does not mean it is not a kennel. However, this is useless, since once again the leader appears completely unharmed with his barrier active. Moreover, he activates another gigantic magic circle and guarantees that this time he will show overwhelming power as several powerful lightning bolts begin to fall from the skies. It is then that he stops to think about the reason why the other day he looked up and saw the wyvern flying freely, and that this is why he could not stop looking. At this moment, the leader approaches, confessing that he is surprised since he thought the MC would die, but he endured firmly, and asks if he finally understood the difference in power between them. Aster admits that the leader is extremely powerful, but Farron asks if he is ready to talk since he still has things to say. The MC does not understand where he wants to go, and asks if by any chance he wants him to be a mercenary again, but he responds that he wants nothing of the sort, and says that his wish is for him to become the leader of the Bongshin family. He is surprised since he did not expect that, and as far as he knows, the Declan family is the most powerful clan on the eastern continent, and strong enough to challenge the throne, and apparently they want him to swear loyalty as one of their vassal families. Thinking about this, he takes the grimoire from his dimensional storage and says that he finally understood the objective. The leader says he is underestimating his own value too much, since he wants not only the grimoire but him as well. Aster holds the grimoire, and Farron says he made a great choice since that action will erase all the crimes he committed. However, the book starts catching fire, and he questions what the hell he's doing. The MC says that he was asked to give the grimoire but was never told it had to be intact. He becomes extremely furious hearing this, and guarantees that he will not have a painless death. Aster makes it clear that he never did anything for money, because being a mercenary does not even pay that much, and asks if he has ever heard of the mercenaries devoured by the young masters of the Declan house. The leader is surprised hearing this, and asks if it is related to forbidden magic. He responds yes, since the damned young men of the house devoured his friends, and the family covered everything up. Farron asks if it was all for revenge, but the MC responds that he is not interested in that, since he knows that the life of a mercenary is not worth as much as his friends. So looking up, he says he simply did what everyone wanted to do. However, he also needed money, and that is why he finally decided to retire, so he would never return to a kennel. Farron asks what his last words will be, and with a snap of his fingers, he casts one of his most powerful spells, the glorious blue flame that never goes out. He orders him to repent for every choice he made, but the MC becomes furious with this nonsense since he has nothing to repent for, as his only option was to be a dog of the Declan family, and therefore prefers to return to the gray zone. At that moment, he laughed like never before, since he had never felt so free, and he laments because he will not escape alive. But since he has no regrets, should he be reborn again, he only wants to find freedom to take his revenge. However, out of nowhere, the fire simply dissipates, leaving him confused. He looks to the side and notices that the leader is standing still, and truly cannot believe that everything is frozen, just like the grimoire in his hand, which begins to fly and makes some magical gears appear on his chest, and he simply does not understand what the hell is happening. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and sees himself holding something. He also sees some people passing by, and does not understand since he was burning to death. He soon realizes that something is strange and questions where he is, and only then does he realize that he apparently returned to the past since the place is familiar. And he finally remembers, because that place is the gray zone where he lived when he was a beggar. He truly cannot believe he returned to the past. The day goes by, and he decides to walk a little and goes near a river, and concludes that he is definitely his past self and younger, and he is certain because a fire mark was engraved on his chest, concluding that the grimoire probably has something to do with it, and even imagining that the Declan family was very interested in the book. He decides he does not care about anything. Either way, it's hard to accept, even though it feels too real to be a dream, and since he is alive and brand new, he decides that mourning should be productive. After all, this is a situation where everything he does can work out, and only then does he remember that he also had a dream just like his friends. In fact, this person called his name and said that they were born as beggars from the gray zone, without clothes, without food, and without education, and asks what is the worst. The MC answers that it is hunger, but he says that if it were only that, they would not be in that place, and once again asks why they are in that mess. Aster confesses that he is fine since he does not care about anything, but this irritates his friend because he does not like seeing someone so carefree in poverty, and therefore says that if they had studied, they would not be enslaved by the damned nobles. And after remembering all that, he concludes by saying that they wanted to build a library, a place where everyone could go regardless of status or gender. However, he wants to take a step further, since he wants to build a tower and does not have many reasons. He just likes big things. He, with his bizarre face, says he will place the Declan's secret manual right at the entrance of the first floor, and both the cover and the content will have the symbol of that family and the secret techniques they guarded, and just imagining it was already making his mouth water. However, the problem is that he does not know how to get his hands on that manual. Either way, he knows that is a problem for the future. In the middle of these thoughts, he receives a kick to the face that throws him hard to the ground, and the boy begins stomping him since he had been saving the boy's spot and was hiding in that place. The MC does not understand what the hell is going on and wonders if this is an ambush even though he has survived countless battles. Then he grabs the boy's foot, who gets scared because he was blocked, and Aster, with his frightening expression, says he was beaten 7 times and therefore will retaliate 70. The boy gets scared, but the MC attacks anyway. But when he lands the punch, he hears a crack in his hand. He looks at what happened and does not understand why his arm is swelling. However, because of this carelessness, he takes another punch to the face and begins to be stomped again. He feels frustrated with this outcome since it hurts a lot. Although his heart hurts more than his body, suddenly, the boy steps wrong on a rock and loses balance, falling into the river. When he gets out, he notices the MC is running at full speed and asks where he thinks he is running to. Then, Aster looks back and makes it clear that he will remember the boy's face since he is not running away because it is a tactical retreat. He returns to the city and sits in an alley, and the first thing he notices is that his wrist dislocated without even throwing a strong punch, and therefore, he believes he will have to forget the construction of the tower because he needs to fix his body first. At this moment, he hears someone asking if he is hungry and notices it is a boy with red eyes. Because of that, he asks if he knows him by any chance, and the boy says no. Aster finds this very strange since the boy is completely dirty, but his clothes look expensive, and because of that, he must be a noble disguised as a walking bomb, and for this reason, he asks his name. The child responds that his name is Damien, and several other things about his life. The MC gets irritated since he is talking too much, but the boy says he has no mother. Aster apologizes and says he has no father and tells them to separate, but the boy just stands still and says he will go with him. This leaves the MC irritated since he does not know whether he should punch him or not, and the boy, with his hand extended, activates a magic circle saying he will heal him. This surprises him, but the boy keeps smiling and recites the words, "Magic touch." However, Aster is aware that this is not just a magic touch, since it is the light of healing, a secret technique of the Nº1 family that fell into ruins thanks to the Declan family. Because of this, his mercenary instincts tell him that he just got involved in something rotten and dangerous, and he does not understand why a child from that family would be in the gray zone. Because of this, he calls for the boy, but Damien, with his different colored eyes, asks if he called him. The MC thinks this is awful, as he remembered that there was a family member with different eyes, and that was the monster of Blandor, the butcher who would not die even if killed. Then the boy starts playing with ants, and the MC does not understand if they are the same person. Before regressing, the MC was a mercenary who went toward the Blandor family at the request of the Declan family. The group questioned why that mission was necessary since the Blandor family was strong. One of them commented that he had heard that a monster who healed himself had invaded the territory and that many had probably died. The MC was wondering if it was an ogre or something like that, and only then did he see what it really was, since it was not an ogre, but a person splitting someone else in half. This person used unique healing magic endlessly, laughing while fighting, nothing more than a madman. He was the monster of the Blandor, the butcher who would not die even if killed. That was Damien von Blandor. After remembering all of this, he is still intrigued as to why a direct descendant of the Blandor would be in a place like that. Suddenly, the boy changes his expression and asks them to eat since his mother said he needs to eat to stay healthy. Aster agrees, but asks if he has money. The boy shows a bag full of gold, and the MC, not being stupid, says that now they are best friends. Damien asks if they will become friends out of nowhere, and he responds that there is nothing wrong with being friends, and friends share what they have. With that said, he shouts that it is time for them to eat. After going to an establishment, he breathes relieved since the dinner he ate was good, and he is confused since Damien is restless. The boy says he has always slept outside his house, and that it is the first time he sees a house on top of where they ate. Then he gets on the bed and says he also has no father. Aster tells him not to act like it is a competition and asks if he at least has a mother. The boy starts looking for her, and the MC is disappointed since if the woman is not in the house, then she must not exist, and he asks how long the boy has been alone. He responds that it was since he ran away from his family and counted 10 times that he slept. The MC is surprised since it implies he ran away and asks if he ran away 10 times. Damien responds that he takes several naps and explains that there are 2 per day, but he only counts the naps, so it totaled 10 times. Aster gets increasingly confused and concludes that he has probably been running for 3 or 4 days, then looks to the side and falls face first onto the bed since he definitely found a madman. He also realizes that he may end up being a babysitter for someone connected to the Blandor family and might even get help facing the Declans. He also knows he needs to solve other things first, so he says he will sleep and asks not to be disturbed. The boy asks if he will practice breathing, and he confirms. Then he begins to sleep and remembers that before the regression, he had stolen several noble magics and almost died several times. And the magics he learned were the body hardening technique, spiritual magic, summoning, alchemy, and several others. However, before dying, he found a truly catastrophic power. At that moment, he opens his eyes and thinks that he will learn the foundation art of the Declans, the technique of celestial origin. He is pleased since he memorized it once he researched it, and therefore begins to use the breathing technique. However, an incredible energy begins to come out of his chest, and he feels an intense burn as if his body were under lava. But he knows he needs to stay focused and endure. Besides that, he notices that his body has impurities, and does not know why they are in him. He is aware that it is a high-level magic used only by the elite. It forces the mana pathway, and burns the impurities in the circuit. That is the mana bath. After going through all this, he opens his eyes as if suffocating, and gets up questioning how much time has passed. Damien, however, is sleeping peacefully. The MC does not hide his surprise since there are no impurities in his circuit, and even his mana is purer than in his past life. But he knows that even so, to defeat the elite of the Declans, even if he regressed 100 times, it still would not be possible. However, full of confidence, he is certain that his chances have increased for having been a mercenary. After all this, the next day Damien says that his hair turned brown, and the MC only imagines that he had to change the boy's hair since it was flashy, and also his clothes since they were noble. Damien then asks what they are going to do, and the MC, smiling, says that they are going to make a little mess. Spotty is outside stretching, and notices that the day is beautiful. Only then does he notice something and sees that it is the MC again, and therefore asks where the hell he went, and if he bathed in sewage by any chance. Instantly, Aster lands a punch on the boy's stomach, making him fall stiff to the ground, and, still irritated, tells him to get up, since he still needs to take 123 punches. At that moment, other boys scream, asking what is happening, and come closer, wanting to know who the bastard was that picked a fight with Spotty. However, this only makes Aster excited, and together with his friend, he wonders if he will go overboard. The brawl begins with the MC beating all the kids while Damien only watches, impressed. He observes the fist concentrating a mana and hitting right after, and finds it incredible. Aster asks if he is following it properly, and he admits that it is indeed incredible. Spotty falls injured in front of him, and therefore Damien uses his healing magic. He thanks him, but the MC tells him not to celebrate too soon. The afternoon goes by, and Aster keeps hitting the boy mercilessly, always asking how many hits he took. The boy cannot answer, and therefore Damien asks if it is his turn, and says he will heal him. The boy becomes even more frightened since he is seeing 2 demons in front of him. After that, already at night, the MC thanks everyone for being there and thinks the energy was great and is therefore proud. At that moment, someone calls his attention. It was Spotty asking if they could leave since they had been beaten enough. Aster answers yes, but the boy says that the place where they are is his house, and the MC becomes furious since he is asking too much from what he understood, and therefore the boys run away. Immediately he turns and notices that someone is approaching. He knows the movement is fast and silent, as if it were a mercenary, and believes it must be someone chasing his colleague. He does not understand since he had been careful, and knows the situation is not good since he has little mana. Then he opens his eyes and gets ready, since when he was a mercenary, he survived many tight spots. That said, he begins to compress his mana, and after gathering enough, he points his finger at the target since he has only one chance. However, the person running starts sliding on his knees on the ground and calling the young master. Damian becomes frightened since it is the butler Alfredo, and the old man, crying, says he spent a long time searching for the boy and almost fell into depression not knowing what he was doing. Damian asks him to let go, but the butler answers no, while begging him to return to the family. The MC finds this scene pitiful until Alfredo finally grabs the boy and turns around, apologizing for not introducing himself, and says he is the butler of the Blandor family. He also says he noticed that Damian liked the boy and therefore asks if he would like to go to the family territory. He starts sweating cold upon hearing this because he knows the basic rule of this family is to reject anything dirty, and he cannot see that intention. But he gets excited since he does not care because he will make connections anyway, and finds it convenient since the family territory is on the way to the capital. After thinking all that, he thanks for the invitation since he will accept it. Then he imagines he strayed a bit from the path of building a library, but at the moment it is not important since he just wants to know if the family has tasty food. The night goes by, and they finally arrive by wagon at the place. The MC gets off the carriage and keeps staring at how big the mansion is. Alfredo says it is late and therefore they should rest and tells Lancy to take care of everything. She, all charismatic, changes her expression and politely asks the young master to follow her. He knows how frightening his mate is and just agrees, and they all go inside the mansion. The night goes by and the butler starts walking through the house until he knocks on a door, then enters, and a woman asks if Damian has arrived. He answers that the boy was in the 7th gray zone. Suddenly, an explosion happens in front of him because the woman became furious upon hearing where her son had been and, enraged, asks if everything is fine, and if nothing happened, Alfredo asks her to calm down and says he will explain everything. After telling what happened, she says she understands and is relieved. He confesses it is a relief even for the MC who helped Damian. After all, the fury of a mother who was once called the Blood Witch is something no one could stop there. She says he did a great job and he only thanks her. However, he comments that there is something strange that deserves attention. She asks what it would be, and he explains that it is about the friend Damian made, because even being a boy, he noticed his presence before even getting close, since the moment he approached the MC was prepared to counterattack. And as he got even closer, he realized it was a magical missile. The madam finds this incredible since he is a talented boy, and finds it strange someone like that being in the gray zone. The butler changes his expression, and says he has a favor to ask. After that, the next day, Alfredo appears in the MC's room, and all cheerful asks him to become his successor. Aster does not understand what the hell is happening, and the butler can only imagine it is something so incredible that it is impossible to refuse. However, he receives a no that leaves him stunned. He looks forward, wondering if he heard correctly since he was rejected. Damian is intrigued by this answer, and the MC thanks for the offer, but says he prefers to leave things as they are. The butler gets an idea because he believes that a boy born in the gray zone never had anything and therefore is overestimating himself. So he begins reciting that the world is very big, and at that moment, he must think he can do everything. However, the more he says something, the more the MC refuses, and this makes him furious. But he knows he must endure, and therefore asks if he has heard the saying of the Canyon Goblin. Aster pretends he is not even paying attention since he is talking about a wyvern, and this is the last straw for Alfredo, who stomps hard on the ground and begins releasing all his aura, making it clear that he will show how big and terrifying the world is. With that, the afternoon passes, and the MC accompanies the butler to another room where all the employees are gathered. Alfredo asks the MC what he thinks since all the employees are new, but Aster soon realizes that family is not joking, since with the mana, he feels it is hard to believe they are teenagers. However, he finds it funny, since looking into each one's eyes, he can see they are nothing but goblins. Once again, the butler asks if he will accept. However, he begins placing obstacles to refuse. At that moment, one of the boys calls the butler and comments that if the MC had really felt something, he would not even think about it and refuse the offer. And since he refused, he must not have felt anything. Alfredo asks if by any chance he is proposing a duel to show his power, and he replies that yes. The butler thinks this is a good idea and therefore asks Aster if he would accept. He quickly realizes that he must be irritating in the eyes of others since all the boys think he is nothing more than a lucky beggar who came from nowhere, and so he asks if he can choose the opponent. Alfredo says yes, and the MC starts by pointing his finger at Winster. However, he does not stop there, as he points his finger at several other boys and concludes that he will fight 5 at once, and even provokes them by asking if they are afraid of dying. The butler is surprised to hear this, but bursts into laughter because he likes the spirit of his possible successor. But before that, he asks if he can take responsibility for his words, and he guarantees that yes. Alfredo thinks this is great and says that if he lasts 1 minute, he will receive a reward, but otherwise he will have to take responsibility. Aster does not like this at all since he is certain that he is talking about succeeding the position of butler, but he accepts anyway. They all go to the arena, and an instructor asks if the boy is not in danger. He answers that yes, and that is why the fight must happen to break the stubbornness he has. The instructor does not like this at all since his career is at risk, and therefore decides to check with Damien what he thinks and comments that the MC is in danger. However, he is simply pleased, but Lancey scolds him since he should not get involved in the fight because the madam will be angry. The butler orders the instructor to start the match, and he is upset because orders are orders. Lancey notices something and says she will step away for a moment, but asks the young master not to interfere. However, he laughs without guaranteeing anything. Runfit goes to everyone and says he will explain the rules, starting with the duel being turn-based. However, the excited butler says no, since everyone must participate at the same time. He does not like this idea at all, but goes back to explaining that the fight ends when one side gives up, but an instructor can stop the duel at any moment. Winster is irritated to see a beggar in front of him acting like he owns the world. At that moment, the instructor orders the fight to begin, and immediately the MC lands a punch on the boy's stomach as well as on all the others, making them fall to the ground. Winster cannot believe what he is seeing, and the confident MC tells him not to underestimate short guys. The boy is frightened, since in front of him, he is seeing the magic mission spell. Aster wastes no time and fires all his attacks, telling them not to judge people without knowing them, and all the magic missiles hit the heads of the boys. He cannot believe he is losing, and in the next second, the MC appears in front of him, assuring him that he will show how big and ruthless the world is, then lands a punch that sends the guy flying. With that, the MC tells him to learn the lesson well, but the boy starts screaming that he is crazy since what he used was not magic. However, Aster runs in saying yes and lands a kick right in his face since it is body magic. Everyone present is shocked by what they are witnessing since Aster is beating everyone up. Alfredo is the most surprised because he saw a magic missile being compressed from 4 to 5 times, and remembers when he was about to receive that attack. He concludes that it is definitely mana control, but what surprises him most is how good the MC is at hitting people. Meanwhile, Damien goes around healing everyone so they can get beaten up more. Suddenly, someone yells the butler's name, who looks back frightened since Madame Lena is watching everything. The instructor cannot believe her presence and cries with emotion since his work partner must have helped. The madam asks what happened, and the butler replies that they were doing a test. She is confused by this since what she is seeing cannot be called a test. She makes it clear that it is for gathering the newcomers so they can leave. Damien is to go to his room just like Aster. Lastly, she calls Runfit's attention and says he is fired. He simply cannot believe what he just heard. After all that, already at night, Bianca asks the butler what his intentions were since he went too far. He apologizes and assures that he will accept any punishment. She sets her cup on the table and asks if Damien helped in the fight. Alfredo replies that he did not, and confesses that he was impressed by how good Aster is at hitting people. Then he apologizes and says he has something to say about the magic missile he mentioned before, and explains that the boy compressed it 5 times to increase its power. She concludes that apparently he is excellent at controlling mana, and has never seen anything like that happening before. Furthermore, defeating 5 newcomers alone with a single magic missile is something difficult even for high-level mages, since it requires manipulating pure mana. She also asks about the proposal to become the successor of the butlers. Alfredo says that Aster firmly refused. She says she understands and imagines she needs to reevaluate the MC and change what she thinks about him, and therefore orders him to bring the boy. He obeys this order, and the madam, accompanied by her son, tells him to sit. The MC asks what it is about, and she hands him a box and says it is the prize Alfredo had promised. He did not know what it was until he remembers that Alfredo indeed mentioned giving a prize. She asks him to open it, and the MC, when picking it up, without thinking twice, realizes that it is a high-class item that shines very brightly. He finds this suspicious, since giving a gift of that level means they are planning something. The madam asks him to accept without worrying, since besides helping Damien, it is also an apology for the fight. He asks if he will need to join the family to be able to eat. She says no. He then asks if it is poisoned. She says no. He then gets straight to the point and asks if there really is no hidden motive. Bianca assures that there is not. Aster gets excited since it was an unexpected gain with no intentions behind it. But the madam says she wants to change the subject since there is something she would like to propose. He immediately changes his expression since he knew there was something behind it. But she, placing her hand on her son's head, simply says that she will arrange an admission for him at the academy and therefore wants him to go with Damien. She explains that her son was supposed to have enrolled 1 year earlier, but refused, and so they delayed it. But they did not expect the boy to run away, and therefore she made this proposal since she knows Damien likes him. In fact, the boy agrees by saying that if a friend goes, then he will go too. The MC thinks it makes sense, since for Bianca it is a problem if her son runs away again, but he also knows it is a great opportunity for himself, since it is a good academy that will give him connections with the rest of the world. However, he also knows it is as if they were putting a collar on him, so he says he will think about it, and she agrees, and says she is curious about something, and therefore asks why he rejected Alfredo's proposal to become his successor. The MC looks toward the door and smiles, then says that he only cares about his knees. The madam does not understand what this means, and Alfredo, who was listening to everything by the door, also questions what he meant. After that, already at night, the MC goes to his moment of meditation and begins to concentrate, since he finally understood what a high-level item does. He also reflects that his physique became suitable for flames, as normally absorbing spiritual power causes some losses and accumulations of impurities, but it was effective. He also thinks about the Academy's proposal and already has his answer since he will join because it will be easier to find a patron, but unfortunately, he thinks he is walking straight into a trap. He decides to take a walk around the mansion, but as soon as he leaves the room, someone asks if his name is Aster. The MC sees that it is a boy, but finds it strange since the direct lineage of the family has only Damien, and he doesn't understand how that family has so many irritating people. So he answers that he is not Aster. The platinum-haired boy finds it strange since the description he received was that the boy had an irritating look and dark hair. Aster points to his own hair and completely changes his expression since he does not have an irritating look. The boy finds what he is seeing bizarre, but soon says goodbye since it is indeed a gentle look and apologizes for the misunderstanding. Suddenly, Alfredo appears begging the MC to clear up the misunderstanding and says that he won't need to kneel when succeeding him. Aster cannot believe that the butler had to appear at that exact moment, and when he looks ahead, he sees that the platinum-haired boy noticed his disguise. Because of that, he points, asking why he lied like that, and irritated, he intends to do something but realizes that Alfredo is in a bad mood and therefore gives up and leaves, but tells him to go to the mages' hall later. The butler asks if something is wrong, and the MC replies no. He still thinks he is very stressed, and therefore it will be good to see the boy later. Then he calls for the head butler and asks if he could meet the madam. The next day, Bianca welcomes Aster and asks if he has already decided since he wanted to contact her very early. He answers that he will indeed go to the academy. She is surprised by this direct answer and happy that it was quick and asks them to prepare as fast as possible. Besides that, he is to feel at home during this time. He thanks her for the kindness and leaves the room. Then the butler enters and she says that the MC accepted out of gratitude. Alfredo gets excited since he expected no less from his future successor and says that the flames of passion are in his eyes, and comments that during the first semester, they will be able to cover everything, but he does not know how the next ones will be, since for a homeless boy from the gray zone, it will be difficult to get a registration. This is when he will take the opportunity, and the butler himself will be like an angel helping. The madam interrupts him and says he is making too much noise. He apologizes since he got a bit carried away. She sighs in relief, but understands why Alfredo is so happy. However, her concern is that she is aware the Academy's proposal is a flawed plan, but she knows Alfredo's confidence must be because he was deceived in the same way by his former head butler. Meanwhile, the MC is walking outside until he looks up and sees a tower, believing it to be the mage's hall. Because of that, he opens the door, and a man asks what he is doing there. Aster remembers that he does not know the boy's name and tries to describe his appearance. With this description, the mage asks him to follow, and after some time walking, they finally arrive at the place, and the man asks him to watch his head after opening the door. He does not understand what that means, but enters the room anyway, and finds several papers flying toward him. At that moment, a man approaches and says it is a pleasure to meet him. The man introduces himself as Wenji von Blandor and asks if by any chance he is there to see his younger brother. The MC becomes confused since he called the boy his brother. The MC reflects that he learned a lot by infiltrating academies as a mercenary. He learned where mages study magic, and they are called pen holders, and their characteristics are, first, the hair became messy from pulling his strands so much that they stopped growing. From there, they divided into stages. Stage 1 denies that the hair is falling and wears a hood to cover it. Stage 2 is for those who stop denying and accept it. Stage 3 completely shaves the head. The last stage is where they try to make the impossible possible, which is magic to make the hair grow. And so far, no one has managed to create it. However, he knows things are different with the person in front of him. Wenji starts by apologizing since he cannot imagine someone acting with bad intentions toward his brother, but he is sure that a guest of the young master would not make such a rude mistake. The MC just stares at him, finding it amazing since the boy is even young. Then he asks if by any chance he works at the Magic Academy, and he answers yes, since he is currently acting as vice-rector. Aster is surprised by someone so young being a vice-rector, and knows that the Blandor family would not put a nobody in that position. Then Wenji comments that Aster is a little different since he is not a typical rebellious young noble. He laughs hearing this, and does not understand how the guy in front of him, being a mage, has no dark circles, and can still smile, and even has great compatibility with him. Then Wenji congratulates him since he heard that the MC was encouraged to enter Zenion Academy, and assures it will be a great opportunity since he will be able to learn a lot. Aster quickly realizes that the guy is trying to get to know him more by talking about the Academy's affairs. However, the silver-haired boy apologizes since he got carried away and started talking nonsense and asks to return to the main point. He places the cup on the table and says he would like to know if he would risk his own life for a friend. The MC starts finding all of this senseless, but Wenji takes a book from his magical inventory and places it on the table saying that he will give the book if he manages to risk his own life. Aster does not hide his surprise since he knows the book is the Blandor family's secret, the healing light. After that, in the garden, the madam is walking a bit and trimming some plants. She looks up and confesses that it was a good decision for Damien to go to the academy since the problem was solved without a headache, and she even thinks Aster is a great boy and friend, besides being talented and having a strong personality. Then she smiles since there is something she liked even more about the MC, which was that he did not change at all even after learning where Damien came from. She finds him different from everyone and believes he deserves to be by Damien's side. However, for that reason, he also does not belong anywhere and is like a bird outside the cage. She knows there are many ways to keep someone close and therefore needs to buy time, since for her son's sake, she cannot lose someone talented. Aster, before the book, does not understand how he is receiving something so important from the Blandor family and begins to wonder if it is a trap. He also looks at the clear and transparent eyes and finds it annoying that he cannot read the boy. The MC knows that if a person is good or bad, the eyes show that emotion. But it is as if Wonji were wearing a mask, to the point that not even he himself knows his true self. The silver-haired boy confesses that the matter of the book is not something to be taken lightly, and asks him not to be careless with his answer. Aster says he will answer, and admits he hates this. Wonji completely changes his expression, and that was the MC's intention. Therefore, he says that if there is something he wants to know, he should say it, and if the MC can do it, he will, and if he cannot, he simply will not. Wonji assures that just hearing it could put his life at risk, and if he hears it and refuses to do it, he might even need to eliminate him. The MC does not let himself be intimidated and tells him to kill him already, assuring that you only live once. However, he remembers that in truth this is his second time living. Immediately Wonji starts releasing his killing intent, which makes even the tea on the table tremble. However, Aster does not change his expression at all. The silver-haired boy smiles and apologizes since he cannot do something like that, and says that the MC passed the test. He also makes it clear that he needed someone trustworthy, and that it could not be someone from the Blandor family. The MC hears this, but inside, he is sweating cold since he definitely felt that the boy almost punched him with all his strength. Wonji explains that he has high expectations since he knows Damien does not look kindly at people. However, his biggest surprise is knowing that the leader of the family, with a great reputation, placed someone from the gray zone beside her son, and even imagined there was something more behind it, and says a good pretext ended up appearing, and that her younger brother and the guest ended up fighting, and, because of that, the older brother called to talk. The MC finds this very suspicious because there must be some reason for the Vice Dean to use his own brother as an excuse to get involved in a conflict. Wonji says the situation was very difficult and that there is no internal conflict since the Blandor family is very united. Then, he completely changes his expression and says he is being watched by the Declan family. The MC is surprised to hear that family's name and asks why. Wonji admits he will only tell because the MC said he is not afraid of dying, even though Wonji himself has no intention of killing him, and says that in fact, he is currently researching the celestial origin magic of the Declans and discovered something. This truly surprises Aster. The boy continues explaining about this secret technique, but the MC interrupts and asks if by any chance he was not supposed to be dead for researching that magic, and questions how he is still alive and why he has not sought ways to destroy it since he is a member of the Blandor family. Wonji says the Declan family is a bit out of the curve, and therefore if they discovered it, even with him being the Vice Dean, he would still be killed. Then, he completely changes his expression again and says that the celestial origin magic, which is the root of all Declan secret arts, is something on another level, and therefore asks him to imagine an auxiliary method that would improve this secret art that is already perfect by itself, and that is why he could not destroy it. And so, he asks if by any chance the MC can feel those feelings. The MC is scared, thinking the guy is not crazy, but crazy as hell. Wonji apologizes since he could not hold back and asks if the MC can understand that feeling. The MC concludes the guy is not only insane, but tests his madness on his own family. However, he realizes the timing matches perfectly, but in his past life, when the Declans wiped out the Blandor family, they found the result of that research, and he concludes the guy from the beginning saw the possibility of a new origin magic and the reason why the leader of the Declan family was so powerful. Amid these thoughts, the platinum-haired boy draws attention and asks if by any chance he is free since it is something on a large scale. Aster asks why he is looking for him. The boy answers that first, he did not talk about the research to his own family because he believes there are spies. The MC then asks if there would not be someone suspicious since the research secret was exposed, like for example, a secretary. He answers probably not and believes it is more related to the acquisition route. The MC comments that if that is the case, they probably allowed themselves to be caught on purpose. Wonji agrees, and since he was in a tight spot, he revealed only a little of the research because he does not want to die. Aster goes straight to the point and asks if it would not be better to ally with the Declans since they would welcome him with open arms. He agrees, but says he has his own reasons, and then stands up, saying he needs the MC to do something since he has no connections with the families, and confesses he unfortunately did not have much progress with the part he was given, so with some papers in hand, he says the reward for doing this will be enormous, and asks only to deliver the thesis he is holding to Professor Perun of Zanian Academy, and after doing that, the MC will receive the Book of Healing Light. The MC thinks for a moment and smiles since he is definitely very lucky. Therefore, he asks to do something else and says he will take the Healing Light magic as collateral for the risk, and also the new celestial origin magic when it is complete, and only from that point on, they will be able to say they are on the same boat, so it is all or nothing. Wenji asks if he has no shame, but Aster asks him to just say yes or no. The vice director sighs since the name of the magic does not matter to him, and he knows that the celestial origin magic will not be useful to the MC in any way, and when it is ready, he will deliver it complete. However, he also says that he has a condition, revealing that when the research thesis is complete, he will need another favor, and when that moment comes, they will need to form a partnership. Aster holds the documents in his hand since he does not find it difficult as long as it is related to the thesis, and also says that he does not know how to read. Wenji simply cannot believe the absurdity he just heard since everything obviously revolves around knowing how to read, until the MC says he is joking and asks if Professor Parnu is really someone trustworthy. The silver-haired man explains that he has been friends with the professor long before becoming vice director, and that they even fought for first and second place. But the rivalry ended when he returned to the Blandor family. The MC immediately understands what the guy meant and starts wondering about this Professor Parnu and finds it irritating that there is another lunatic like the silver-haired one at the academy. After that, already at night, the MC removes everything he had in his possession and imagines that he received a spatial pouch since he needed to keep the thesis extremely hidden, but does not understand why there are so many books. However, he notices that there is also a letter. He decides to read it and already imagines it will be a pain. The letter says that he selected and saved the essential magical texts so he can learn in the future and wrote the order in which he should study them, and therefore asks him to devote himself to cultivating the intellect worthy of the talent he possesses. He is surprised by Wenji's words and then organizes all the books since he needs to study from basic to advanced. He finds this great and then picks up a pen and begins listing the sponsors. He reflects that, aside from the Book of Healing Light and the Celestial Origin Magic, he is in possession of 132 books and thinks about the new friend he has made since he is receiving many privileges from this friendship. Furthermore, he knows that the books he received from Wenji are not ordinary books since they are a perfect study guide and will allow him to learn any magic. He then concludes that, at first, he only thought about filling his tower with books, but now he is thinking differently since the identity of the tower will be a place that offers knowledge to all who seek it. Still, at night, somewhere else, Wenji is observing the moonlight and imagines that he had an unexpected gain since, regarding Aster, he would use him to deliver the thesis to the professor, and, if he did not do so, would simply discard him. However, he found the MC extremely interesting. After all, he found something interesting and remembers when Aster asked him to kill him at once since you only live once. Remembering this makes him burst into laughter since he felt that he really wanted him to kill, and, even knowing it was an empty threat, he found it sensational. Moreover, he felt that the MC's gaze was not something superficial since he definitely treated death as if it were nothing. He concludes that Aster is completely different from anyone in the gray zone, and therefore believes the boy is hiding many things. But he does not care since he found someone with the same level of gaze, and above all, who produced the same results as his work. However, he admits to being worried if the MC really does not know how to read, but finds it impossible. The next day, already in the morning, Aster prepares to leave and has his luggage ready. The maid picks up the suitcase to carry it and says that when they arrive at the academy, she will process a simple document registration and also informs him that he and the young master will not need to take the entrance exam. Then she looks back and, smiling, says that the boy matched the outfit very well. The MC thanks her for the compliment and starts imagining what it is like to not need to take the admission exam since it is a privilege of noble families, and he does not think it is bad. Then Damien calls for his friend, and Bianca asks them to take care of themselves, as well as reinforcing that it is a great opportunity for Aster to achieve excellent results. And he thanks, but imagines that he was already thinking about the results he wants, since he knows that Xenion is the greatest Western academy and countless sponsors are there, and therefore he needs to take them all for himself. Then, confident, he asks all his future colleagues to wait for him. While they are traveling by wagon, the MC picks up one of the books and concludes that Wenji is in fact an exceptional mage, since the fundamentals of magic are simple, but the interpretations change from person to person. Comparing it to water, for some water is life, but for others it is a disastrous flood. A difference in perspective, and even following the same principle, each noble house developed in its own way. Then, after analyzing many grimoires that were in the bag, he realized that the alterations Wenji made to the celestial origin magic are surprising. At this moment, Damien calls his friend and shouts that they finally arrived, since they are in front of Xenion Academy. Aster is not even surprised, even though he did not know the academy, and Lancey informs that the carriage cannot proceed from that point on, and explains that during the admission exam, it does not matter if one is noble or not, they must enter on foot, and therefore she says they must say goodbye, and still wishes that both learn many things. They both say goodbye to the carriage, and Damien shouts that they need to run since they were told they cannot be late to get the seats. The MC does not understand what the hell the boy is talking about, since the ceremony is not a play where whoever arrives first sits first. However, he reflects on what the maid said and imagines that maybe it is so Damien does not get lost in the school, and therefore he will let it go, since Lancey is somewhat sweet, but not a good person. After entering, several people are gathered, and Damien does not hide his surprise since he is very excited. He looks around and says that Lancey was right, since if they had not arrived early, they would be left without a place to sit. The MC just takes a deep breath, puts his hand in his pocket, and reads where they should sit. The young master asks them to hurry since they need to sit quickly, and the MC does not understand since Damien was exactly the person who did not even want to step foot in the academy, and he does not understand how he is so excited. At that moment, someone bumps into the boy hard enough to knock him down, and, looking up, he sees it is a brute. The guy asks if there is a problem, and Aster just helps his colleague up. Then Damien apologizes and says he will pay more attention when walking. However, the guy tells him to wait and asks what the hell they spilled on his clothes. The MC notices that it is saliva and believes the guy must be the heir of some noble family. Immediately, Damien starts cleaning the guy's clothes with his own saliva, and this makes the guy even more furious to the point of throwing a punch with everything, calling him an idiot. However, the attack is blocked before it hits Damien's face, and the MC, holding the guy's hand, tells them to stop right there. The man asks who the hell the boy is, and he replies that they are just friends. The brute says he understands since he saw that they are good friends, and confesses that few would take a punch for a friend. But unfortunately, they chose the wrong person. Aster quickly realizes that it will be difficult to get along with the students on his first day, and does not even care anymore, since he asks if he wants to settle it with a fight. Soon, people start gathering, since they heard there will be a fight, but do not know who the people involved are. At that moment, a person shouts asking if everyone is kidding, and asks if they will just stand still. The students do not understand if it is to separate them or something like that, and the boy points out that no one can fight with everyone around, and therefore everyone should give space to the newcomers. Immediately, the students use their magic and form a barrier around the fight, and even start betting on who will win. Meanwhile, someone is watching from afar and finds this interesting. Exter prepares himself and says he is from the Dolampe house and asks the MC's name. He replies that he is not from any noble lineage and therefore he should think of him as a nobody. The guy finds this interesting and, since the space is small for mages, says he will let the MC throw the first punch. The MC hears this and smiles since he found the guy funny and therefore provokes him by asking if he is not talking too much and if, by any chance, this is fear. Exter becomes furious with this provocation and charges forward with everything, delivering his most powerful punch. But Aster blocks the blow, and gathering mana in his arm, warns that he is not just a lake, and with that lands a full punch on the guy's cheek, sending him flying far away. Exter steps back and cannot believe how he received such a strong punch, and no longer even knows if Aster is really a mage. Suddenly, his body begins to heal, and he realizes that the one using magic is Damien, and does not understand why the hell his enemy is doing that. Because of this distraction, he looks to the side and receives another blow that he blocks by reflex. Time passes, and Exter keeps defending the entire time, unlike the MC who keeps attacking non-stop, and Damien is always happily using his healing on the opponent. Exter starts thinking the two of them are crazy, and after taking a combo, he questions whether he is actually feeling fear. At this moment, the audience shouts, telling him not to hold back since he is the sacred pride of Dolompi, and therefore everyone trusts him and wants him to finish the fight quickly. These words enter his mind and he screams furiously because he does not know how a mere second-class mage is acting so cocky, and therefore he throws one of his strongest punches, even surprising Aster since it was not bad at all. The big guy does not stop there, and gathering even more energy in his fist, he lands a direct hit that even causes an explosion inside the arena. This time, the students liked what they saw since they are cheering for Exter. However, the guy is not happy at all because he felt the punch land, but he also knows it seemed weaker than it should have been. The MC does some flips backward and wipes the dust off his body from the blow he took. Exter notices this and becomes even angrier to the point of charging in without thinking. Aster finds this interesting, and since he sees Damien healing the enemy the entire time, he knows he must finish it with a single strike. So he begins to concentrate and electrical mana appears in his hand, a technique he developed with his partners in his past life. He prepares himself, and since the opponent is right in front of him, he does not waste time and charges forward, landing his collision-style technique. The impact is so strong that even the students outside the barrier feel it. They cannot believe what they felt, and after looking at the fight, they see Exter falling to his knees and collapsing to the ground. Everyone is too shocked by the result to react until the MC appears through the smoke, and with a serious face orders everyone to applaud and shout. Immediately, all the students cheer excitedly since it was an incredible fight. Damien then calls for his friend, and with a smile, says he is happy they won. Aster is satisfied with the outcome. Meanwhile, a student is watching from afar and admits he never imagined there would be a mage who fought so well. At that moment, someone shouts telling everyone to leave, and the furious inspector demands to know who started the fight on the very first day of class. The MC notices the problem he caused, but deep down, he is fine since he is a mercenary and could escape that place in many different ways. However, Damien shouts that it was him and Aster who started the fight, and the MC, hearing that, simply cannot believe what he is hearing since this kid is crazy. After that, they are taken to a room and the school inspector says that since the two confessed, they will let it slide without punishment, but guarantees he will keep an eye on him from that moment on. The MC just stays quiet listening to everything, and after that they leave the room and he feels relieved since the ceremony has not started yet. As they walk, other students gossip since they saw Aster defeat a martial artist, even though he was smaller. Damien thinks it is awesome that people are looking at them. After walking a bit, they see that their seats are empty, and Damien excitedly says that their new friend probably saved their spots, and that it is incredible. But Aster knows that is not the case. Then the director introduces himself and begins his long speech. Damien even falls asleep, and the MC is surprised since the director delivered a long speech and did not even sit down. He then looks to the side and finds it incredible how fast his friend fell asleep, and to make it worse, he is drooling. Suddenly, he notices that someone caught the director's attention, and this person informed him that there is an important place he needs to go to. The director finds it strange since nothing should be more important than the entrance ceremony, but with no other options, he apologizes to all the students because something urgent came up and says he will finish the lecture at another time. Because of that, he calls Jaira, who approaches with her long hair. But out of nowhere, she lets out a scream telling everyone to pay attention. Since it was so sudden, all the students get scared, including Damien, who even wakes up. She introduces herself and informs everyone that she will continue the ceremony. First, she asks to begin with the freshman's oath, and the first will be the representative of the magic division, Dahlia of Denai. The girl starts climbing the stairs, and everyone whispers that she is the third daughter of the family head and probably has incredible abilities. The MC also observes and reflects that the Denai family is the second most powerful, only behind the Declans. In this family, Dahlia grew up to become the future representative of the eternal second place. He knows she is a capable girl, and, in the past, since they did not get along so well, Others might imagine they were terrible friends. Either way, he finds it interesting to see her entering the academy that year. Next, Jaira calls the next representative, who is Paul from the martial arts division. He stands up, and Aster notices they did not call him by a family name, so he must not be a noble. The two students who were called remain standing, and the redhead says she will introduce the teachers of class 172, and therefore asks them to enter. However, before that, Dahlia does not stop looking toward Aster, and he notices it almost immediately, but turns his gaze away since there is not much he can do. At that moment, the girl falls to the ground because she was not paying attention. Meanwhile, the MC is watching carefully because he needs to find out which of the teachers is Parun. After a few introductions, the last teacher arrives and introduces himself as Parun, the one in charge of the magic principles of Magology classes. The MC is surprised since he was actually expecting the man to look like Wenji, but they are different, and since the platinum-haired one used a mask, he will not judge too quickly. Jaira informs that the teacher's introduction is over and the entrance ceremony is concluded, so everyone must follow the staff to their designated dorms. As everything ends, Aster calls out to his friend, who asks if it is over. He replies that it is not, since they caught the boy sleeping and therefore they were expelled, so they will go straight home. Damien processes what he just heard and is shocked, not believing something like that happened. After that, still in the academy, the MC walks to his new dorm, finding Damien's reaction to the joke funny, until he finally arrives at the place and enters, amazed at how big the room is. He also notices a box beside the bed and realizes it contains materials. He hangs some clothes in the wardrobe, and while doing that, hears someone entering and notices it is the guy called Paul, believing he will be his new roommate and even looks irritated. Paul, without much conversation, asks that they do not bother each other, and also states that it does not matter who the person is or what he will do the whole time since he does not want conversations or anything like that. And face-to-face with the MC, he asks if he understood perfectly. The MC thinks the guy is too bold, and Paul asks why he is not answering. Suddenly, Aster makes a slight movement, and the guy gets scared, questioning what he is trying to do. But the MC finds it interesting since the way the boy would draw his sword would be in a manner certain not to hit anything. Then he smiles and says he will go out for a bit, and tells Paul to do whatever he wants. However, in exchange, he tells him not to complain if he himself makes noise after midnight. Then, outside, Damien meets him and asks who the roommate is. The MC replies that he has no idea. Damien, still full of energy, asks to walk around the academy since there are many things they need to see. Aster knows that the Zenian Academy is gigantic, and therefore it is a good idea for them to get familiar with it so they do not get lost. And he says he agrees since it is not a bad idea. However, he imagines that something is bothering him, and it is not as much as in his past life, but his senses are on alert. Then, observing in a certain direction, he notices the presence of a mercenary from the Declan family and becomes excited to discover how many more of them are in that place. With that, the two begin walking through the enormous magic academy and pass by all kinds of places, even finding a pond inside the academy. But after walking so much, the MC is already feeling tired. Then, he tells Damien to make one for him. The boy does not understand what he means, and he explains that he is talking about the pond, since it is enough to ask them to build one in his mansion and pour water inside, and he will have a pond just like the academy's. Damien finds this incredible and says he will ask for an even deeper one. Then he starts imagining what name he would give the pond. After that, they spot a statue and he decides he also wants one. The MC suggests making one in the shape of a dragon and says the scales will be wonderful. After that, he asks to return since it is already late and imagines that he managed to count 7 mercenaries in total and that there are probably more than 10 hidden, and based on how they are all distributed, he believes the target is the second magic hall of the academy. He knows that the place is where Parun is, and besides that, the Declans must also know about Wenji's friendship, and therefore they would obviously suspect that connection. He looks back and becomes excited since he had even wondered why they had not acted yet, but the moment he thought about it, they all began to move, and because of that, he wants to discover how much the mercenaries know. After that, Already at night, a mercenary moves at high speed throughout the academy until finally reaching number 2. He asks where the others are, and the hooded man replies that they went ahead. He then asks whether he is referring to the main or secondary target, and the mercenary says that apparently they discovered something about the main target, and that by midnight, the objective will be delivered to the secondary target. The man says he understands and reflects that the main target, which is Wenji, has begun to move, and among the various secondary targets, they must watch Professor Parun. Only then does something cross his mind, and he questions the single digits, since the target is powerful, and they need at least a single digit. The hooded man replies that number 1 will not appear, nor the other single digits. This worries the man since the situation is not good, but the hooded man asks him not to worry, since Callahan, who is the fire demon, will join them. The man is surprised since he knows that this person is the vice leader of the Declan's mage squad, the Red Jewel. He even likes the idea of the guy being cold-blooded, but that is why their lives are in danger, as they will die if they jeopardize the mission with that person present. The hooded man warns that the operation cannot turn into an open conflict. And with that said, the two leave through the window, but they do not realize that Aster had been watching them the entire time and also overheard that the mission would be at midnight and that Callahan would be present. He knows that Callahan, even when he was a mercenary, never left his prime. After the Declan family bet their own survival against the Blandor family, he remained loyal to the family that was in decline, proving his devotion. Even at that moment, he is a dangerous man. But his golden era happened after the war against the Blandor, the firestorm of the Declans that no one could stop. He is a man who managed to carve his name into history as a war mage. The MC concludes that he will have to put an end to this mage. After all, Callahan's magic is one of the Declan's arcane fire arts. Because of that, he wonders why one of the mercenaries suddenly appeared, since it seems he obtained an unexpected gain. However, he still has a doubt, since their target, which is Wenji's thesis, is in his own hands. And even so, the mercenaries said it was delivered to the secondary target, Professor Parun. Besides that, he does not believe it is possible that the thesis in his hands is fake, and there is no way their objective is anything other than the thesis. For this reason, his conclusion is that what will be delivered that day is a false thesis. Meanwhile, in his room, Paul puts on clothes, puts on his glove, prepares his sword, and gets ready to leave the room. But before that, he looks to the side to see if the MC is sleeping, even though, in reality, it is a dummy. At this moment, in the magic hall, Parun is reflecting and sighs since he thinks the Declans are bastards because he tolerated it when they crossed the line and did nothing major, but they invaded his territory, and he does not understand why they are so confident. At this moment, the door opens and someone enters. Parun notices that they are mercenaries, but he immediately calls Paul by name since he recognized him, and even asks him to define the disguise better next time. The boy simply shows an envelope, and the professor, after looking at it, says that he probably will not have another chance to do this. Paul begins to sweat cold, but the professor only grabs the hand and immediately notices that it is Wenji's, and concludes that his friend planned to deliver the thesis avoiding the Declan's eyes, and even then, they were caught in an idiotic way. However, he does not think that is the case and does not understand what trick Wenji is using. At this moment, an explosion is caused in the hall, and the man responsible says it is a pleasure to meet the professor. The one responsible was Callahan, who introduces himself and wonders if a mere laboratory professor knows him. Paul prepares his sword since he was caught by surprise, while the fire-haired man says he did not know he had a mercenary as a guest, and once again asks if the professor recognizes him. At this moment, he changes his expression because Parun replied that he had never heard of him, and, standing up, orders him to say what he is doing in that place, since the stench of shit is ruining his nose. Callahan finds this funny and confesses that he has never had so much fun since no one ever dared to speak in that way, and pointing at Paul makes it clear that the boy will die, and also warns that the professor will be left with only one eye. He says this and casts his magic, completely blowing up the hall where they are. Paul did not even have time to see what happened until he looks to the side and sees that he was protected by the professor's ice power. Parun calls his attention and warns that he will not treat him in that moment as a student, but as a mercenary who will have to protect his own life. He replies that it is not a problem, The professor notices that not even an alarm went off, and therefore the Declan family must have used concealment magic. So, at that moment, apparently, the only one he can trust is a rookie mercenary. Callahan one day says that apparently the envelope is from the Blandor books, and it also seems that it will not be delivered willingly, and excited, asks if they want to play. At the same moment, an incredible aura of fire begins to overflow, but the professor still shows no reaction. Besides that, he also summons his ice magic, and both attacks collide, completely destroying the tower with such power that it was seen from afar by the MC, who is not surprised that the fight has already begun. Then, he takes a mask and puts it on. Then, prepared, he says that at that moment, he is not Aster, but the #1 mercenary in the world. He stands witnessing the destruction, and with his hands together makes his prayer, asking please to be given permission to become a good mercenary again. However, he knows that there is nothing good about him, and jumps toward his current mission. Meanwhile, in the completely destroyed tower, Callahan bursts into laughter while praising the mercenary for surviving so well. Paul is completely pressured, and after looking down, he realizes how lucky he is since the talisman he received earlier is a protection one. At that moment, the professor appears ordering him to get out of there, and counterattacks the firepower with his ice power. Then, he praises the mercenary for surviving so long, and therefore can believe in him a little more. He says that, and casts a spell on the sword which surprises the boy since it is ether magic, an enchantment magic. The professor asks if he can keep blocking the attacks, and he replies that he can block as much as needed. He says this imagining that since he cannot retreat, he will have to block, or he will die. Callahan calls the attention of both, and says that a mage and a warrior make a great duo, but he casts another powerful fire spell that is blocked by a slash from Paul. The professor realizes things will get complicated, and concludes that if they continue the way they are, it will be a problem. So he imagines he will have to use his trump card. The amount of mana present in nature is limited, and 2 commanding entities are ordering it at once. Then, a struggle for control begins between the entities, and because of that, he wonders how much that guy would endure. Callahan watches the professor unleashing that enormous power, and also gets excited since he wants to do the same, and both begin to overflow with devastating power, as if they were 2 monsters. The power becomes more and more intense to the point of causing catastrophic destruction in the place. Paul watches this and thinks everything is crap, since he is witnessing 2 monsters fighting, and there is simply no gap to escape the power. He is lying on the ground unable to move since he did not imagine things would escalate to this extent. From afar, it was possible to see a giant whirlwind, and the Declan's mercenaries are on alert, but one of them tells them to wait since attacking at that moment is suicide, and asks how many mercenaries they still have. However, in the same second, they are swept away by a trail of destruction and conclude they were caught in an ambush. At this moment, the MC finally arrives at the battlefield and appears in great style, drawing the attention of both Callahan and Perun. Aster just tells the 2 to pay attention to the badass entrance he made. This makes the 2 mages cease their attacks, and the Firehair, furious, asks if this is some kind of joke. However, the MC moves at high speed and reaches Callahan's neck, saying that place will be his grave. The mage feels the danger he is in, and, acting on impulse, raises his arms and fires a colossal firepower that even throws him backward due to the pressure. Even so, his body is injured, and without time to think, he finds himself cornered once again. He tries to do something, but cannot due to the mana deviation he suffered, and at that moment, several mercenaries appear to help him, and he takes the chance to grab a mana vial and starts drinking it to fix the mana deviation problem. Then his concern is knowing how the hell someone so powerful appeared out of nowhere. Besides that, he is surprised since the MC is wiping the battlefield with his incredible powers. Callahan simply cannot believe how amazing this is since the movements show no sign of mana waste, and only then does he realize he is getting impressed by the enemy. So he changes his reaction and shouts that everyone will die. Saying that, he fires one of his most powerful fire spells, completely sweeping the place and even taking his own mercenaries along with it. The MC just watches this power approaching, and a devastating explosion happens. The next second, Callahan wonders whether he hit his target or not, and knows that other allied mercenaries were caught in the attack. but he does not care since the important thing is completing the mission. He sighs, since being so destabilized does not match his style. He sees a vial on the ground, but when he tries to drink it, he gets startled since he heard a voice in the smoke. It was the MC saying that on the outside Callahan looks like a lunatic, but deep down, he is nothing more than a cold and cunning snake. Then, he appears with his magic missile aimed and guarantees that such coldness will kill him. He says this and fires the attack at maximum power, leaving the vice leader without any reaction and still standing, even after taking the attack that simply pierced through the middle of his forehead, finishing him with that single strike. Aster approaches the body and admits he expected nothing less from the powerful Callahan, since any other mage would have died in the ambush he set. But his reflexes were as good as always, and his last spell ended up working in his favor, since it eliminated other mercenaries and created a smokescreen, and if it had gone on longer, he would lose. After all, his mana is still very low. He starts rummaging through the body until he finds a pouch, since he knows that most war mages do not trust anyone, so they carry their own grimoires. He keeps it since he knows the pouch has a recognition spell, but he will undo it later. Then he looks to the side and tells the professor that he is late. He responds that he was busy dealing with some rats since he captured countless mercenaries. Then he gathers energy in his hand and asks if by any chance the MC is also one of those rats. He responds that he just dealt with a lunatic who is an ally of the Declan clan and still receives such a question. The professor concludes that apparently he showed up on Wenji's orders, then tells him not to worry, but keeps wondering who the person Wenji trusts so much is. Then he asks who the mercenary boy who was with him was, and if by any chance they divided the research into 2 parts. Aster says that the research he received is probably fake since Wenji likely planned all of this using the boy as bait. He says this, but imagines that even using a concealment spell, the fight was extremely intense, and even though the report was delayed, it is strange that the Imperial Knights still have not appeared and believes that the Declan family bribed them. Perun then asks if he has the real thesis, and he responds yes, handing over the papers. The professor takes the papers in his hand, and after reading, asks if he knows the content. He responds yes, and confesses that he does not even care about fighting. He just wants to know if he is sure he wants it, since he would not like to lose a great ally. Perun agrees since he received the papers safely, and therefore asks to end this. But before that, he wants to know what he would like in return. Aster does not understand this, and the professor says that Wenji only trusts one type of person, someone who has clear desires that align with theirs. And since he earned that trust, he thinks it is fair to give something in return. The MC finds this interesting and responds that he wants a book. The professor does not understand this, and he explains that he will build a large and majestic tower, and inside it, he will place books for anyone to read, and he would like one written by the professor about the perspective of arcane sciences. Perun finds this funny since this is not something everyone will be able to understand, but he did not think the idea was bad. The MC says he is leaving, but before that, the professor questions how they will keep in contact since he has more papers to deliver. He becomes thoughtful about this, and after opening his dimensional pouch, he takes an item and throws it toward the professor, saying it is a communication crystal. Perun takes the item in his hand, and after trying to say something, realizes he is already alone. Sometime later, the Imperial Knights arrived at the scene, and everyone present who was still alive received help. The area was quickly isolated, and the MC, already in his sleepwear, pretends he knows nothing. Damien notices his friend's presence and asks where he was. He responds that he was taking care of some business, and imagines that he has the body of Callahan and the mercenaries. And since the evidence is clear, the Declan family will stay quiet for a while. Then he thinks about his seal, which reacted during the fight, and normally that does not happen, but it was good since it helped him block the powerful attack he received, and therefore he does not complain. It is an elemental technique that mages use often and prevents the caster from being harmed by their own magic. He remains thoughtful about this and concludes that he will have to investigate it further. At this moment, someone calls for him. It was a student introducing himself as Chenbi. Aster asks what he wants, and the boy comments that he fights very well. The MC becomes worried that the boy may have discovered his identity, and if that is the case, he believes he will have to kill him. The boy says he found the fight he saw during the admission ceremony incredible, and therefore asks how he can fight like that. The The MC feels relieved since he apparently gained a good reputation, and only replies that his opponent had little ether, but things will change the next day, and with that, he walks away. Chenbi, a little embarrassed, says he wanted to stay with him since he hasn't made any friends yet, and asks if he understands. Aster imagines that yes, and knows that the Academy promises equal treatment regardless of origin, but that is a promise from the Academy and not from the students. The boy says again that he was very nervous, and that when the problem spread, it will be strange to be alone. The MC says he understands, and the two continue talking normally, with him even imagining that it's good to have someone normal to talk to from time to time, since in this new life, he has only met lunatics and even forgot what a normal person is like. Then he concludes that it is time to start his academic life. After that, the next day, all the students are gathered in the classroom. Damien does not stop yawning since he is dying of sleep. At this moment, Chenbi appears greeting the two and says he can't believe they will have classes right after the chaos that happened the previous night. The MC agrees and also notices that his new friend does not seem to be from a noble family or have much money, but even so, he is not shy, is even cheerful, and seems like a decent person. The boy calls his attention and comments that he discovered their teacher will be Miss Zira. The MC does not understand what he is talking about, and he gets excited to say who she is, since she is a woman who massacred a horde of trolls alone. Right after, the teacher arrives, and the MC finally understands, since in reality, he is talking about Professor Jaira and did not know her real name was Zara, who was at the entrance of the ceremony. She greets everyone, introduces herself, and talks about the chaos of the previous night, but says that something like that could not hinder their studies. She then informs them that she will measure the mana of everyone in the room, since this measurement evaluates the quantity and quality of each one's mana, and she asks if anyone knows which of the two is more important. At that moment, a person raises her hand. The student introduces herself as Arzen and says she does not know if there is a concrete answer. However, she would say that quality is more important, and explains that when facing a mage as powerful as yourself, the one with better quality mana would naturally have the advantage. The MC hears this and imagines it is simply the book answer, since mana quality affects precision and stability, and even if you have a lot of magic, it is useless if you cannot hit the target. But in truth, he knows reality is different. He barely thinks about it when the teacher clicks her tongue, displeased, frightening the girl. She then asks what her family is. Arzen replies that she is from the Barony Pelham family. With that, the teacher takes a deep breath and says she expected no less from just any family. This comment leaves the girl extremely upset, but Zara, not caring, asks if anyone else would like to try to answer. She notices that no one is speaking, so she points to another student. He stands up and says he believes that the quantity of mana is more important since in large-scale battles, quantity would be better. Aster reflects that in fact, the thought is correct, and from another perspective, quantity can surpass quality, and in summary, it depends on the situation. However, once again, the teacher gets irritated and asks the boy's family. He replies that he is from none. Once again, Zara asks another to speak, and the students start guessing anything like family, speed, determination, and this only irritates the teacher even more. The MC starts to worry, since the teacher is hard to please, and she tells them to listen to everyone's answer and says that in fact, they were all close to being correct, but there never was a correct answer, and therefore she wants them to think a little about the kind of answer they gave. She questions whether it was something they thought of on their own, or if they were just trying to guess. After all, a mage should never lose their conviction no matter where or when, and staring intently at everyone, he believes that no one had the mentality of a true magician and orders everyone, from that moment on, to become real ones. All the students are moved by this speech, as well as the MC, who in the end was right, but found that teaching method crazy. With that, the teacher announces the mana measurement and calls Arzen first. Zara says that the girl will be the representative of Class M3 of the Magic Division since she gave a very good answer, and because of that, she will record the mana levels of her classmates. The girl runs excitedly, and Aster notices that teacher's way of training. Meanwhile, Chenbi is dying of envy since he wanted to do that. Zara asks the assistant professor to proceed, and he, with a cape in hand, removes it, revealing the magic device. The teacher comments that many probably have never seen that magical item, and that it is time to discover everyone's mana level. After all, What she wants is to discover if there is a monster among them. She explains that the student just needs to place her hand on the crystal ball and force the circulation of mana into it. Arzen does this and feels the crystal overflowing with enormous power until an information appears on it. With that, the number 4 appears in a magic circle. The teacher says that among the various indicators in the magic circle, the main one is the large number in the middle, and explains that it represents the refinement index. In other words, mana quality can go from level 1 to level 10, and Arzen is at level 4. So considering that last year's freshmen were on average level 3, it was quite impressive. The girl thanks her for the compliment. Then, she goes to the mana quantity measurement, and hers was level 17. In this case, mana quantity can go from 1 to 100, and last year's average was 15, so the girl's result was a bit high. The teacher says that both the quality and the quantity of the student's mana are excellent, and therefore congratulates her, leaving the student dying of embarrassment with so many compliments. Meanwhile, the MC observes attentively. After some time, several students did their measurements, and they commented among themselves on what they needed to improve. At this moment, Chenbi stands up asking for his mana to be measured. The MC asks if he wants to go so quickly. At this moment, they hear a scream because a girl achieved a refinement of level 6, even though the average was 3, and also a mana quantity of level 20, which was surprising. The assistant asks for her name, and the girl answers that she is called Furion de Denai. Aster immediately realizes that she is from the same family as Dahlia, and judging by her hair color, they must be from collateral bloodlines. The assistant admits he is surprised and did not expect less from a descendant of a noble family. She laughs and thanks him. At this moment, Damien wakes up not understanding what is happening, and the MC explains that they are measuring mana. The boy gets excited and shouts because he wants to try, and that shout embarrasses Aster since he is drawing too much attention. The three begin descending the stairs, and the students watching them whisper that the heir of the Blandor family looks too young, and that the person beside him was the one responsible for hitting Exter. He hears all of this and laments it, since he did not want to be known for beating up a child. The assistant asks Damien to try, and the boy asks if he just needs to circulate his mana into the crystal. He says that and starts doing what he was told. Right after, everyone becomes terrified as they cannot believe what they are seeing, because the mana quality reached 9 points and the quantity 67, and they question if it's not a mistake. The MC finds this funny, even though it is normal for ordinary people to react this way to a genius. After all, it is a wall beyond what common sense can understand. He admits that he knew Damien was a genius, but not that he was so absurd, although it matches the monster of Blandor, who was extremely powerful, and apparently, he was just born like that. He believes that in his past life, if Damien had dedicated himself, the entire continent would have changed, but he knows that in this life things will be different, and that the Blandor family will forever be an obstacle for the Declan, and will make Damien transcend beyond any common limit. The assistant praises Damien as someone worthy of the Blandor family, and asks him not to let fame get to his head. The boy, not understanding anything, just says, "It's fine." He runs back and asks the MC to measure as well. Aster thinks about this, and imagines that everyone must be curious about his measurement, since he is not from a noble family, and yet stands beside someone from the Blandor family, besides having beaten the second son of the Dolamp. Anyway, he goes to the crystal, and decides he will stay discreet with a median score to avoid problems. He begins adjusting the property of his mana a little, and also using a decent amount, but when doing so, he becomes confused because he does not understand why the limiter is so low, and believes he messed everything up since it will come out much higher than expected. With that said, his refinement index was level 10, but the numbers started rising so much that the system began to bug, and ended up giving an error since the limit was exceeded, and therefore the device had to be restarted. People do not understand what the hell limit exceeded means, and Damien just shouts that his friend is incredible. The MC tells the assistant that the device is not working and that they will need to measure again, but Damien says it is correct. The MC only imagines that the boy should shut up, but Damien does not do that and insists even more that the test is absolutely correct, irritating the MC more and more since he wants him to just shut up. The assistant restarts the device and Aster takes the test again, giving level 3 in refinement and level 15 in total mana. He breathes in relief since he was much more careful, but gets scared when hearing someone shouting that it is bullshit. He turns and sees that it is Damien and asks where he learned that curse word. The boy, completely irritated, replies that a friend taught him that when something is a lie, you call it bullshit, and therefore he thinks all of that is bullshit. The MC begins to sweat cold since apparently he can no longer speak carelessly near Damien. After that, in the afternoon, in the first magic department, Zara is restless, and all she imagines is the renovation of the second magic department and the attack by Declan and the mage called Callahan against Professor Perun. However, she knows that this professor was quite famous in the past and therefore should be able to handle it. At that moment, the assistant approaches and says he has the measurement results in hand. He delivers the report, and she notices that the level of that semester is quite average and soon sees that Damien had a suitable score for the greatest talent in the family's history. However, her surprise comes next, since in Aster's report it was stated that he had to redo the test due to an error, and the error code was limit exceeded. She becomes intrigued by this and ensures she will keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, Damien asks if it looks good and shows a monodragon. The MC replies that it looks good. The boy feels relieved, but Aster says it would be interesting to make it a bit more dynamic. Chenbi is surprised by everything he is seeing since even the great Furion managed to manipulate only one spiritual body, and Damien is playing with mana as if it were nothing, concluding that the world is truly vast and that he himself is nothing. The MC observes the boy like that and even understands the feeling, although unfortunately, it is necessary to just face reality and move forward. Damien calls the MC and with a smile on his face says that the day was fun and that he definitely made the right choice in entering the academy. He is surprised and sighs, since he thought it was good to hear that. Sometime later, the MC takes Callahan's spatial bag since it is locked, and he needs to understand the principle of the magic because he will be able to easily break the owner's pattern. He knows that with the right tools, he could finish in less than a week, but had to keep hiding. However, he knows that he did not spend all his time only on that, since he transformed the elixir he received from the Nº1 family and absorbed it. He also managed to gain a considerable amount of knowledge at the academy, but his current focus is discovering what is inside the bag. And after managing to unlock it, he sees that it contains some potions, a huge cape that he definitely will not be able to wear, and a defensive artifact. He finds it interesting since a defensive power is not bad. However, what interests him is something else, and he finally takes out the Declan's secret grimoire, the Crimson Flames. It is a secret magic inferior to the flames used by Farron, which is an extremely powerful magic that burns everything without leaving anything behind. He is aware that it is not something he can learn overnight, and only then realizes something about that day, since if he is not mistaken, the semi-annual performance evaluation will take place. All the students are gathered, and the most excited one is Damien with the number of people, and Chenbi explains that all the classes are gathered. Besides that, he asks the MC if he heard the news, then says that there are rumors that this semester's evaluation might be in advance through the canyon. Aster understands what his colleague means, since that test has 3 practical types, which are the corridor of challenges, a sewer-like labyrinth where one must reach the objective, the advance through the canyon where students run to the finish line, and finally the simulator, where one duels against a person or a monster. He concludes that he does not care which event it will be but wants to pass without many problems. However, he is noticing that Chenbi does not seem to think the same since he is extremely restless about the test. At this moment, a voice shouts for everyone to be quiet, and Perun appears saying that he is in charge of Class M1 of the Magic Department. The MC is happy to see the professor and jokes that his dark circles are worse than the last time they met. The professor says that, as everyone already knows, the semi-annual performance evaluation will take place. Then, in a few words, he says that the chosen test is the corridor of challenges. This information completely frustrates Chenbi, since he had come up with 1,000,000 plans for the other tests, but not for this one, and for that reason he falls into despair. Perun orders them to form a line since he will explain the rules. He says that the objective of the test is simple, since the corridor of challenges is a sewer-like labyrinth, and they must reach the final gate. Chenbi says that apparently it is not that difficult, but Perun makes it clear that it will not be just a meaningless race, and says that there will be golems along the way. The boy cannot believe such absurdity, but other students tell him to shut up since he is talking too much. The professor repeats that the golems are made in a clumsy way, but will still be complicated for the current level of the students, and therefore, they must advance carefully. All the students begin complaining, and he already notices that for mages, they all lack composure. This reminds him that Paul showed courage, pushing himself to the limit, but perhaps it was the environment's fault. However, he is aware that there are some students with potential, starting with Furion, who shows strong determination. Arzen has a strong gaze, as do other students, different from Damien, who does not seem to be thinking about anything. Suddenly, the professor calls everyone's attention again and explains once more that the golems will only act as guardians at intersections, and whether to defeat them or avoid them is up to each student. Besides that, a bracelet will be given for the evaluation, which has a defensive power similar to a force field. He says that if the force field is broken, the student will be disqualified and the golems will begin ignoring them. Everyone is surprised by the complexity of the test. But finally, the professor says that he will give a suggestion and tells him to impress him, since he does not care who is first or who defeats more opponents, as he only wants him to show something impressive, and he will give a reward that will not disappoint them. The MC becomes interested in this and is more motivated. He reflects on the largest library on the eastern continent. It is divided into 3 levels: upper, intermediate, and lower. The level he can access is the lower one, but he did not find any magic book there. In the end, if he wants to find a clue, he will need to search at least in the intermediate level. However, the other way is through the recommendation of 3 or more professors. Knowing this, he decides that he needs to obtain Perun's reward and finds it interesting because he memorized everything from the cross-section diagram. Sometime later, several students go to the assistant professor asking for floral bombs, but they are denied. Another asks for a golem controller, but is also denied. Aster notices the mess, seeing everyone acting like leeches. Then, he looks to the side and sees Damien asking for 20 vine seeds. The assistant professor says it is not a problem, but does not understand since the boy's main element is another. Damien then uses his power on the ground and says that he has no main element, but can use plain magic. Chenbi observes from afar and becomes increasingly frustrated. The MC notices this, since even Damien, who is always joking around, is making his preparation, and therefore wonders if the boy will finally come out of his shell. At this moment, the professor informs everyone that he will give each person's starting point, and it appears on the panel. Damien says goodbye, as does Chenbi. Aster reflects that 6 people will start at his starting point, and he doesn't even know their names. At this moment, someone approaches asking if his name is Aster, and the MC immediately notices they are not people from room M3, and that he has never seen faces so arrogant and detestable. The guy introduces himself as Dibe, and since he saw the MC fighting Exter, he wants to make a proposal. He says he will buy the bracelets of those the MC eliminates, and states that he will pay 30 gold coins for each, and excluding Aster himself and Diba himself. In the end, he could receive 90 coins. He imagines that 30 gold coins is what a plebeian family earns in a month, and wonders if he will really give that for a single bracelet. The boy reinforces that, for a beggar from the Grey District, it is not a bad offer, and believes the young master is protecting himself, but doesn't know how long it will last since he should be looking for ways to survive. The MC thinks he is not completely wrong, and that others might even call it cowardice or create resentment. However, they are doing the best they can with what they have. He asks why 90 gold. Deeb asks if that is not enough, and says he can offer 35 gold per bracelet. However, Aster still says it is wrong and points to the 3 people who will enter together, but also points to the other 3 boys, since including them, there are 6 people, and therefore wants to know why they are removing themselves from the count, since the deal increased to 35 coins each, meaning the total should be 210 gold, and that is how it should be counted. The 3 become outraged hearing this, and Diba becomes even angrier, since he doesn't know what kind of loan shark scheme this is, and that a plebeian doesn't know his own place. Therefore, he says 40 gold coins and nothing more, but this only makes the MC say that now they must pay 240 coins. Daibi wonders if the guy is insane, but it is clear he is using the opportunity to make good money. He also noticed that the MC doesn't even think this greed could harm him, but expected nothing less from a barbarian who can't think. He realizes things will only get worse, and therefore turns around saying there will be no negotiation. However, Aster asks where he is going since, even with the deal broken, he still owes for the bracelets. The boy becomes even angrier since he doesn't understand what the hell this is, and he explains that he must pay 120 coins for having initiated the contract. At this moment, Pecan begins calling Aster an insolent plebeian, wanting to rise above the situation, and angrily tells a nobody not to try to take advantage of the mighty Dibe. The boy keeps yelling until Dibe, extremely furious, orders him to shut up since he is making him look like a clown. Then he says he will pay the 120 coins since he imagines that orders have more priority than the will of idiots. He takes the coins, but Aster says he will need to increase the fee since they are all nobles, and the price rises, and therefore must pay 160 gold. The boy accepts and pays correctly, but makes it clear that from that moment on, he will show how difficult 160 coins can make someone's life. After that, everyone approaches a magic circle, and the professor explains once more that if the bracelet's function is disabled, the student is eliminated. He also talks about the force field, and that they can also make attacks in Buenos like a human, and if the barrier is destroyed, the bracelet will remain in place, and the user will be forcibly taken out of the environment. With that said, he orders the test to begin, and all the starting circles begin to shine, teleporting everyone to the testing zone since the evaluation has started. Perun keeps imagining that Dahlia and Damien started at the same starting point, and that it will be interesting. However, the assistants shout that something is happening and the screen has frozen. The professor places the cup on the table and asks them to check the magic eye, and from which starting point it happened. The guy turns around and says it was from the third starting point. After the teleportation is complete, he gathers energy in his hand and blows up the surveillance camera, also saying it will be a headache for everyone. At the same time, all the boys have their magic aimed at him, and Dibe says he will pay to see how long that confidence will last. He says that, and everyone launches their spells at the same time. Aster reflects that being hit by magic means immediate disqualification, and he will be teleported out. So he simply dodges with his absurd speed, and while preparing his kick, imagines that he only needs to cease his mana before impact, and with a precise hit, he will be able to strike them all without getting them disqualified. He goes around hitting everyone, and finds it strangely satisfying since he loves beating others up. He says he is waiting for the young master to be full of money and completely serious, says that another 320 gold coins will have to be taxed for insolence, and that, from that moment on, it will be 1 silver coin per hit. After some time, Dibe gets up completely injured and says he will pay for everything he did. However, it is useless to say that since it only served for him to receive another punch in the face, and the MC imagines he delivered 100 hits, so it will be 10 gold coins, and finds it complicated to control his power without Damien healing the enemy. He picks up the bracelet that fell to the ground and wonders what he will do since he managed to obtain 6. He sits down to think, since he needs 3 recommendations. So, besides Perun's reward, he needs 2 more people. His focus is to understand what he must do to impress the professor. He starts imagining whether he should destroy the corridor of challenges, since the place only has 4 pillars holding it up, but thinks it is idiotic since it is asking to die. Besides becoming the enemy of the entire continent, since he doesn't know exactly what to do, he decides to just keep walking and, meanwhile, imagines how his friends are doing. Meanwhile, elsewhere, 2 boys are completely terrified, warning that if it continues, everyone will be disqualified. Damien, with a golem formed on his back, says there is no way he will let anyone pass. The boys run away since they have no idea how a golem is being controlled with vine seeds. One of them trips and falls to the ground, and when he turns around, he is terrified since the golem is about to crush him. Somewhere else, Chenbi only tells everyone that he just wants to pass the evaluation and nothing more, but in the next second he screams while hiding, asking them to stop attacking, but it is useless. The girls are getting tired from using so much power. He hears them talking and sees an opening to run away without being seen, so he flees at high speed. However, halfway through, he notices something since his bracelet simply stopped working, and he becomes completely frustrated, trying to understand whether he was hit by some magic without noticing and was therefore disqualified. He sits down waiting to be sent outside, but finds it strange since it doesn't happen. Suddenly, a voice echoes in his head, asking if he can hear and giving its greetings. He is startled since the voice he hears is not from someone in the academy. The voice says that most must have guessed who is responsible for it. including the reason they are there. And for the one who suspects its identity, the message is for that person. It informs that it has no request, and that they are only there to receive the consequences of angering a powerful being. Then it gives its final warning, assuring that all the students will die since there is no escape. The assistants panic because they do not know what the hell is happening, but Perun simply tells them not to panic and to go after the teachers, especially Zara. He shouts that he will do it immediately and runs off to contact the teachers and the director. Perun then destroys the table with his hand, and furious questions how those damned worms dared to do this. Inside, a golem is destroyed, and the MC confesses that he thinks it sucks, since an absurd number of golems will not stop appearing. The MC goes on defeating golem after golem, and reflects that 10 minutes have passed since the voice echoed through the test site. And during that time, he noticed that the golems that should be slow and rigid had become fast and agile. In addition, he noticed another pattern, since the guardian golems are invading on their own, and that means someone tampered with the control system. However, this only makes him more excited, since he considers himself the #1 problem solver, having survived everything except an aerial battle. So with a smile on his face, he charges forward with everything, wanting to crush everything in his path. Meanwhile, Chenbi resumes walking and, upset, imagines that he would have let himself be eliminated if he had known what would happen, since he does not want to die. At this moment, something catches his attention, as it seems someone is approaching, until he realizes it is Aster, which makes him extremely happy until he sees that his colleague is actually being chased by several golems. The MC approaches and tells him to run as fast as he can, and both flee from the golems as if there were no tomorrow. He imagines that he felt someone's presence and even thought it was Damien, but that is not the case. And if they keep going at that pace, Chenbi will be caught. So he decides to go to Plan B and asks for the boy's bracelet. He explains that the detection range of the golems is not very wide, and that this means the bracelets are connected to the control system. Chenbi asks what Aster intends to do. He replies that he has already been identified as something, so the chances of the others surviving will be greater if the golems keep focusing on him. He also says that his colleague probably has a family, someone he must live for. Chenbi reflects on this, and remembers his parents telling him to focus only on learning about magic and always encouraging him. He swallows hard at these memories, and hands over his bracelet, but tells his colleague to survive, since they must meet again at all costs. The MC tells him not to worry, and stays behind to hold off the golems while Chenbi runs as far as he can. While doing this, he remembers that he must live at all costs, since his parents bought him a grimoire instead of food, and his younger sister was forced to drop out of school because of him. Therefore, all he wants is to repay everything he received, until he sees his mother saying he is the pride and joy of the family. This memory in his head leaves him paralyzed, as he does not know if he truly is someone to be proud of, since he is indecisive and not courageous. He looks back and wonders if he really is someone to be proud of for abandoning a friend. He decides that he can no longer let himself be consumed by guilt. He raises his hands and begins to overflow with intense energy, since he will never give up again. The stones around him begin to collapse, and all he can imagine is that the magic left to him by the master who awakened his talent is something unique, and so he begs for it to work. With that, he creates the Earth Spear, a power as intense as a knight's lance. Chenbi shouts for Aster, who looks startled and sees the powerful Earth Spear coming toward him. He dodges the colossal destruction of the attack, which was aimed at the golems, and only then realizes that the magic he witnessed not only changed the shape of the rock that makes up the trial hall, but also its very substance. He sees the destruction the attack caused, and all he can imagine is that the power is at a level so difficult that his friend should not be able to handle it. In fact, Chenbi was completely injured from using this power, and, as he falls, the MC catches his body in time before his head hits the ground. The MC calls for him, and the boy says that his master taught him the spell called Earth Spear and believes it is a grand name. However, Aster replies that it is not that grand, but also not completely dull, and warns that, in truth, whether it is grand or not depends on the caster. Chenbi's voice begins to weaken, but Aster pours a potion into his mouth and tells him to stop the drama since it is not as if he would die from using that power. Then, he thinks about what he should do since he cannot take him along and also cannot leave him behind. So he begins using his detection magic and notices a presence a little ahead in the labyrinth. With that, he instructs Chenbi to go in the other direction, and when he finds a fork, he should continue to the right until he meets the other students. The boy understands the instruction, but asks what he will do. The MC looks to the other side and notices that the flow of mana toward the control room is strange, and therefore answers that there is something he needs to do first. He runs through the labyrinth and keeps wondering where that strange sensation came from. He realizes it was not something from the Declans, but from something else. Only then does he understand what it is, since right in front of him is something from the demonic realm. He smiles, since he is feeling something that is not so familiar, even though that demonic energy is unforgettable. In addition, there are also demonic beasts, since they even recreated those cursed creatures that terrorized the continent centuries ago, always doing the worst possible things. He becomes extremely excited and calls Frizen a filthy rat. Meanwhile, in the control room, Frizen bursts into laughter, since it was a success, because a demonic beast truly appeared and the demonic realm manifested perfectly. Before, it was only a partial success when only the demonic energy appeared, but this time it is complete. He knows it was all thanks to the ancient artifact he possesses, since, with spatial isolation, he sneaked into that room and, with the corrosion of demonic energy, took over the control room, being able to manifest the demonic realm at will. Then, a man in the room asks if it was really a success, since he did things halfway. Frizen replies that just generating demonic energy already fulfills their contract and guarantees that the professor they want as a target will fall on his own. The masked person says it does not matter, since as long as the Xenion Academy is destroyed, that is great. Frizen agrees and calls him the watchdog of the Weimar family. The man tells him to shut up if he wants to stay alive. Frizen reflects that the guy is nothing more than a vassal of the Declans, who goes around putting on that fake bravado, but he will endure it, since when the contract ends, he will gain his own laboratory. Then he smiles, since the most important thing is to create the demonic realm, because he will be fulfilling a hidden desire and finds this joy addictive, as it is the Society of Forbidden Magic. Salvation. The man then asks how much time is left until they gain control of the core. Since a student is approaching, Frizen does not believe such nonsense and comments that the first test subject has finally appeared. The man does not understand what he means by test subject, and Frizen asks if by any chance he is curious, since he must want to know what happens when a human is exposed to so much energy like this. He explains that according to ancient texts, it is different for humans, humanas, or ether, as they will undergo beastification. Frizen continues thinking about what he should do, since along the way, there are golems and demonic beasts, so there is nowhere to run, and he will be forced to retreat. Suddenly, the MC completely changes his expression, frightening both of them, and, smiling, tells Frizen to wait for him. The masked man, upon hearing that a student knows Frizen's name, questions whether he has seen the boy before. Frizen replies that he has not and has no idea who he is, and does not even have the slightest notion of how he knows his name. In addition, he is shocked to see that the MC pulled several test bracelets from his pocket, and cannot believe what this might mean, since he deliberately attracted the monsters. Aster prepares himself, and, with his absurd speed, jumps from monster to monster, placing the bracelets on them. This causes the golems to focus on the demons as targets, while the MC merely watches them destroy each other. Frizen goes mad over this, since his babies will be destroyed. In addition, he does not understand how the hell a student can be so fast. He screams desperately, ordering his creatures to stop the intruder, but with such absurd speed, there is nothing they can do until the control room is destroyed. The two cannot believe what they are seeing. The MC then greets Frizen, saying that they have finally met again. Elsewhere, Chenbi is frightened, since right in front of him, he manages to find Damien, but the latter is playing with the golems as if it were nothing. Another person also arrives at the location, and Furion questions how Chenbi got there alone. However, before answering, he notices that she is wearing a bracelet and therefore shouts for them to throw the bracelets away, since the golems are tracking them through that item. However, another girl approaches, saying that this is a testing site, and that therefore, it makes no sense to trust someone who tells others to throw away their bracelet, so once again, she wants to know if he is perhaps trying to steal everyone's bracelet. He is startled by that expression, since he did not mean that. Once again, she asks if he is trying to take everyone's bracelet, and he asks if she really believes that, given the way things are, the bracelets have any importance, and explains that they are linked to the control system and are acting as trackers. She questions how he discovered this, and he replies that Aster told him moments earlier. She smiles, finding it amusing, and says that apparently he was deceived by a vagabond from the gray zone and now wants everyone to talk in an attempt to deceive them as well, since he fell for such an idiocy. In addition, she points out that apparently he is the type who does not like to fall alone, and that even someone who paid attention in class ended up being tainted by a vagabond. These words leave him completely furious, since he knows that Aster is an incredible guy who was willing to sacrifice himself to help a new friend. However, before he can say anything, he hears someone talking about when they met the MC. It was Damien telling about the first time he met Aster, and that he had asked what he had, and without even hesitating, the MC replied that he had a friend, and that is why he trusts him, his friend. Having said that, he throws the bracelet on the ground since he does not need it, and, smiling, calls Chenbi to leave that place. He is surprised to see this reaction from Damien, since he had never witnessed anything like that from him before. Meanwhile, in the control room, the MC tells Frizen that they have finally reunited and says that he even once went to the demonic realm to kill him and did not expect them to meet in that place. Frizen calls him a lunatic, since he does not even know the MC nor the demonic realm that he mentioned, and orders the hunting dog to protect him. The masked man asks if this really is the first time they are seeing each other. He replies that it is, and Mordor turns around saying that he has a contract and therefore has no choice, and warns Aster that he will have to die without even leaving traces. The MC soon realizes that this is the Weimar family, a vassal of the Declan. Wind magic is this family's secret magic, a prestigious family known for its speed and piercing power similar to that of an archer, and the man is considered a dog, a being who acts like a true hunting dog on the front lines of a hunter. Thinking about this, he questions why the Weimar dog is together with a rat. Mordor is surprised, since he also knows who they are. Suddenly, Aster shouts, since he asked first, and angrily questions why the hell the Weimar dog is with a rat like Frizen. The masked man does not understand why the hell a boy is screaming like a madman, and considers that he must know he is going to die, and therefore asks what he will do if he knows the answer. Once again, he shouts, repeating the same question. The dog becomes increasingly irritated and shouts, asking him not to repeat the same shit. Then he launches his attack, but the MC simply dodges the chains with extreme ease, and once again, repeats the question, wanting to know why the hell the Weimar dog is with a rat like Frizen. He calls him a bastard, since he does not stop repeating that question, and questions why he is so obsessed with it. He begins to manipulate his weapons and controls them in the direction of Aster, who continues to repeat the same question without stopping, and with each question makes the dog more and more furious, increasingly wanting to tear the MC to pieces. He reflects that, with his return magic on his weapon, it is impossible for anyone to dodge. However, Aster comments that he is too stressed since none of the weapons were accurate. He prepares to grab the chains and says that he has raised dogs before, and explains that these animals become anxious when they hear a very loud noise repeatedly, just like Mordor himself at that moment. The masked man becomes even more irritated since he is being treated like a real dog, but due to this distraction, he takes a direct hit to the ribs. In addition to the MC stating that, in fact, he is nothing more than a Declan's dog. Frizen sees this and shouts, wanting to know what the dog is doing, since it makes no sense to get beaten by a kid. However, the MC, with all the strength in his fist, delivers his final attack, which completely explodes the opponent, killing him with just one punch. Then he calls out to Frizen, since he keeps hiding behind other people, and says that only he is left. The bowl cut guy panics, since a mere student is acting with such confidence. But before he can do anything, the MC appears with the dog's weapon and cuts off the guy's arm, leaving him with nothing to do but scream in pain. Then, he tells him not to come any closer, since he does not even know who the hell he is. After that, he thinks of something and says that if he is killed, he will not be able to stop the demonic realm, and therefore wants to know if he is planning to let his friends die. The MC asks what the problem with that is, and even says that he will wait until the demonic realm devours everyone, and with his frightening expression makes it clear that he will be next. So he should laugh as much as he can, because soon he will never do that again. Frizen becomes increasingly frightened, since he does not understand how the hell a mere student can have so much swagger, considering that it is not just demonic energy, but an entire demonic realm. And even so, he does not care if his friends are devoured, and he questions whether he is even human. Then, once again, he claims that only he himself can stop the demonic realm. The MC approaches at high speed and with a slap, knocks the gauntlet out of the guy's hand. He is shocked since his artifact was ripped away and he did not even see when it happened. Aster asks if he really believes he is the only person who can use the artifact. Then he places his hand on the crystal and begins to overflow his energy. Frizen does not understand how the hell a mere boy knows so much, and the MC replies that he could not forget it, since he was the one who taught the young master the forbidden magic. Now, about this forbidden magic, the young master managed to come out alive because of the blood that runs through his veins. However, Frizen did not have the same luck, since the Declan accused him of countless crimes and decided to execute him. Because of this, the MC went after him, since he did not want to hand him over to the Declan. He states that at the time he even went crazy and did not even know how much time had passed, and he felt proud to manage to find him, since of all the people he was the only one he could not find, which only shows how clever the guy is at running. He says that he searched the gray zone, the slums of the kingdom, and even the underworld of the empire, and in the end, there was not a single place he did not search. Then, after hunting him for so long, he discovered that in the end, the place where he hid was the demonic realm. The MC bursts into laughter remembering this, since anyone would definitely go insane in that place. And even so, he could not find him, because the demonic beasts were attacking all the time. Eventually, he gave up on the demonic realm and decided to leave, and a mercenary was waiting outside. He said he had news, but did not have the courage to enter the demonic realm, so he waited outside. Then, with his bizarre expression, he reveals that the news was that Frizen was already dead, and that the Declan had captured him and extracted every piece of information about the forbidden magic in the artifact. Frizen, already without strength on the ground and with a trembling voice, says that he truly does not understand what the hell he is talking about, since compared to the young master of any family, he himself is nothing more than a servant. Aster takes a potion from his pocket and hands it over, since he does not want him to die and even wants him to rest well. Frizen cannot believe that he is being healed and knows that this is his chance, because he needs to find an opening to survive. The MC resumes telling his story, revealing that on the day he looked up at the sky, the wyvern was right above him. Then, when he looked at himself, he seemed like an idiot. His revenge had stopped being for his companions and had become merely a form of emotional release. Frizen realizes that he has an opening to escape, but the MC places his hand on his face and slams him into the ground, at the same time that the MC shouts that he has finally found him to take his revenge. He is excited, since the wait was long, and he even went after the knowledge he had left behind several times, such as information about the demonic realm and the forbidden mana of that disgusting artifact. He activates his magic toward the chains and pulls the weapon into his hand, thinking that he will recreate every detail of the pain he felt and that it will be fun. Frizen starts crying from how scared he is, even without understanding what the hell is happening. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, the golems are being destroyed and the professors are working at full capacity, since they need to find the students as quickly as possible. Felina, on the other hand, is furious about the whole situation, especially because she spent 2 hours on a damn ancient magic. At that moment, someone calls her and shows a crystal ball, also saying that all spells have been dispelled and that the internal magical eyes system has been restored. She takes the crystal ball in her hand and orders them to prioritize locating the survivors instead of capturing the intruders, as well as not announcing it to the public since they do not know how they will react. The staff agrees and resumes searching for anyone. They begin finding the students and even the golems chained by Damien's vines. The professor observes from afar, trying to understand what happened since the intruders had control of the corridor of challenges for 2 hours, and, even so, there were no casualties. Suddenly, Professor Perun calls her through the communicator and says that he entered the internal control room and that she will not believe what he found. He shows it through the crystal ball, and Felina is completely shocked as the professor is asking to see how the intruders already were when he arrived. She admits that she has seen many strange things, but the way the intruders were annihilated is bizarre, and she does not understand who could have done it. Then something crosses her mind, and she remembers when she received Aster's report. It was revealed that he was a street child from the gray zone and was accepted through the entry rights of the Nº1 family. The professor comments that the exceeded limit error goes far beyond the level of a student. Zaira agrees and admits that she does not know if he really is a student, and therefore he must be closely monitored. At that moment, someone appears saying that he is late. She is startled, since the director appeared completely out of nowhere. He says that he came as fast as he could, and in a few words, upon seeing the crystal, asks whether the one responsible for the whole bizarre scene of the intruder's elimination was the MC. After that, on a rainy night, the MC reflects on something about that world. Every mage has something called an inner demon, a cursed thing that appears without any warning and completely destabilizes their mind. It is something very frequent, and that never ends well. In his past life, there was nothing like that. And as a mercenary who did whatever he was ordered to do, even seeing companions die was part of the job. He concludes that if his companions had not died because of a forbidden magic, he probably would not be so furious. He even believed that he had buried that rage, but his emotions exploded when he was in the corridor of challenges, somehow becoming the seeds of an inner demon. He realizes that it was like the old days, since, as if he were carrying a bomb in his chest, he could explode at any moment. He stands up and simply thinks that he is an old mercenary and that there is nothing more familiar than uncertainty. Finding this level of tension good, he takes the book out of storage, since a week has already passed since the incident in the corridor of challenges, and it is the perfect chance for things to calm down, with him being in better physical and mental condition. Aster decides that it is time to read the secret grimoire of Crimson Fire, a secret art he learned in his past life. It was an attribute-less art given to mercenaries. Learning a secret elemental art like Crimson Fire is something that is happening for the first time. So he read the first chapter, Ignition, dozens of times, always checking if everything is correct at the end. He knows that the primary mana circuits are not very different from magic of celestial origin. He closes his eyes, since merely circulating mana through the Crimson Fire circuit will only give it the aspect of fire. Therefore, he needs to mentally imagine the clear form of fire, a solitary flame that needs nothing else. He concentrates more and more on the fire, a flame that does not need oxygen. The power continues to form until it completes the ignition step. He is surprised, since it remains powerful as always, and compared to the mana he normally uses, the power of that magic is roughly double. The MC knows that, at the moment, he needs comprehension, and his current limit is once. The recoil is much stronger than that of attribute-less mana, which, at that moment, makes a collision-type casting with fire mana out of the question. He finds it a shame that he cannot use collision casting, but he knows that with time he will be able to. With that, he knows he is one step closer to the leader of the Declan. He reflects that for now, he needs a magic that is worth using, and, in any case, fire element magics do not require that much compatibility between secret art and magic. Only then does he realize something, as he feels a strange sense of pressure, and whoever is causing this pressure is deliberately showing their presence. He decides to go to the place to see what it is about, and upon arriving, he realizes it is the director, who says that he understands the reason for Professor Felina's suspicions, since the MC has decent perception and clean control of fire-type mana, and therefore considers him decent. The two stand face to face, and the director, without much talk, releases his incredibly powerful aura. Aster does not understand what the hell is happening, since the same thing happened with Wenji, and he wonders why everyone gets excited whenever they see him. He does not let himself be shaken, since he is a former mercenary and prefers to be broken rather than bow. The director asks if there will be no greeting, making it clear that despite not seeming like it, he is the highest authority of that academy. The MC holds on as much as he can and immediately bows, saying it is a pleasure to be before the director. The short man bursts into laughter, since the good manners were impeccable, and says that he can scream as much as he wants, since he has isolated all the sound from the surroundings. The MC realizes that the director is smart as hell. Then he asks what he is doing in that place in the middle of the rain. The old man sits down and says that he has some questions to ask and wants to see whether he will answer them correctly or not. And once again, with his absurd aura, asks them to sit down. Aster simply cannot believe the pressure he is feeling, since it is not just killing intent, and he kneels without understanding whether that pressure is just mana. The director then comments that Professor Felina told him that the MC is hiding some things, and then, with his colossal pressure against Aster, which even manages to destroy the ground, asks what is actually going on. He simply cannot believe that the man in front of him is the same old man who was stuttering in the Grand Hall, since he is definitely a monster. However, compared to the bastard from the Declan family, he is nothing. He begins to overflow his energy, trying to read the flow of mana that is pressing him against the ground, and after managing to stand up, activates his indirect method, releasing the pressure on himself. After things calm down, Aster admits that he took care of the rats that were causing trouble in the challenge corridor. The director finds it strange and asks if he will not even try to hide it, and he replies that no, since it is not something that needs to be hidden, and confesses that it would be better if they did not find out about it, but it is not something he cares that much about hiding. Then he asks if there are any more questions. The old man becomes serious once again, and the MC becomes worried, since he feels like he did back when he ate the wyvern in Fern. The director takes a deep breath, and Aster realizes that the old man is a rare kind of lunatic, since he becomes serious and then normal, until he becomes serious again, oscillating like that. The director admits that the MC has a great eye, and therefore says that he will ask only a few questions, and that he should answer only the ones he can, since that is better than beating him for no reason. With that, he sits down and realizes that the atmosphere has become different from before, and that it feels more like a war mage, with a frightening atmosphere befitting someone who is the director of the school. With that, the old man prepares to ask the first question, but the MC interrupts and asks whether he happened to hear about a wyvern becoming food. He does not understand what the hell he is talking about, and the MC apologizes, asking him to continue. This irritates the director, who warns that if he is interrupted again, he will be beaten, and that, as he is younger, he must show respect. Since there are no teachers on the battlefield, Aster does not understand what the hell he is talking about, since that place is not a battlefield. But since he knows that the strong decide the rules, he obediently kneels. The old man realizes that he can finally speak seriously, and, getting straight to the point, questions what kind of scum the invaders were to have been left the way they were. Before answering, Aster asks what he intends to do. He replies that he will crush them, since the Emperor will approve, and with that, he will gather his old companions once again. The MC reflects that these so-called old companions must be war mages or powerful knights, so they are not ordinary people, and therefore answers that those responsible were the Declans. The old man is left speechless upon hearing this, and asks whether he happens to know a mage who became wyvern food. He replies that he does not, and the director comments that he does not either, and that he is sensing inconsistency in his answer, and therefore wants to know what he is hiding. Aster gets pissed, since the old man is as sharp as ever, and even thinks it would be wonderful if all the blame fell on the Declans. So, seeing no other option, he reveals that it was the Weimar family, one being the hunting dog and the other the magical engineer Frizen. The old man asks whether he has any evidence of this, and he merely asks whether he really wants everything handed to him on a silver platter. The director says that the MC is truly insolent in the way he speaks, but simply accepts it, and asks how he knows the two of them. He shakes his head, indicating it is one of the questions he will not answer. The old man realizes this, and they continue talking for some time. After that, he says he understands, and the MC imagines that he said everything he needed and tried to answer in the best possible way, but he could not reveal the regression or the grimoire. Even so, he is noticing from afar just how pissed the director is. In any case, the short man accepts it and asks whether he happens to know a mage who became goblin food, because he still feels that something is missing. Aster grows concerned and tries to stall, but the director tells him not to smile with rotten goblin eyes. He apologizes, since the old man is always attentive. The director looks up and comments about Aster's dream of building a library as tall as a tower, and it is indeed a great dream, and says that if he leaves the top floor empty, he will fill an entire wall with shelves. The MC thanks him for that, and imagines that the world turns because of blood ties, regional ties, and academic ties. Then the director warns him about the admission ticket to the library, which he will give if he does a favor. The MC sees the shit coming, and he warns him with his gaze. threatening that he does not need both eyes to see the world. Aster realizes that if he slips up, he will have an eye ripped out, and therefore says that he is eager to know what the favor will be. The senior replies that the favor can wait, since they will resolve it with time, and says that an artifact that summons a demonic realm is dangerous, but can also be used in several other ways, such as spatial isolation, from which even the MC himself could benefit, such as when building the tower. He grows concerned, since the old man is always one step ahead. After all, the spatial isolation function of the artifact can even create magic circles in the corridor of challenges, rendering them useless. So if it is a magic that even the Academy's professors could not break, it could obviously be useful in protecting his tower, but he knows there is a problem and comments that he does not have much knowledge about magical technology. The director tells him to go talk to Professor Felina and will even pull some strings for him, since she is someone he can trust. Even so, while he himself does not further investigate the identity of the MC, it will be difficult to convince the professor not to do anything. With that, the two continue talking for a long time. On the following day, at the academy, the students are going back and forth, just like the MC, who sees someone calling out to him. It was Damien and Chenbi, fat from eating so much. Aster questions why the two look like a ball. Chenbi feels embarrassed to answer until a student calls out to him, wishing him good morning, and also asking if he would like to train magic another time. Another student calls out to Damien, thanking him for everything he did in the corridor of challenges. Chenbi explains that thanks to the tip the MC gave about the bracelets, everyone kept saying how grateful they were, and many even gave gifts. And their parents also helped his family a little, which is why he is extremely grateful. The MC picks up his book again and says, there is no need to thank him for anything, since he did not ask anyone to do anything, because it was Chenbi who decided to tell things to the students, and that change created everything that happened. Then he asks about Damien, since he does not know what his friend did. Chenbi explains that Damien found a golem at the beginning and controlled it using plant magic. Then, they sit down to talk better, since it has been a week since they last saw each other. However, he is startled when he sees someone approaching to talk to Aster. It was Professor Felina, asking for a bit of his time. They go to another room and she asks if he already knows why she called him. The MC says that the only certainty is that it was not to give advice. The professor confirms and goes straight to the point, stating that apparently he is a descendant of an ancient war mage, and asks whether the mind behind the incident was the Weimar family. He confirms and also calls them trash. She says she knows this, since anyone who associates with the Declans is trash. The MC reflects that this moment is the scenario the director arranged, since drawing the attention of the Blandors under a secret identity would be dangerous. So they decided to make him a descendant of an ancient war mage who had been wandering the continent while hiding his identity. In addition, they made his master someone who harbors resentment against the Declans and the Weimars. And this is good, since it matches what he truly feels, making it the perfect scenario. Felina confesses that there are many suspicious points, but since it was the director who reported everything, she will let it pass for now. Then, embarrassed and fiddling with her hair, she says she will cover everything up, since he does not seem to be a threat to the academy. Seeing this, the MC calls her attention and points out that he himself is a student while she is a professor, and the age difference might be a bit high. She becomes even more flushed upon hearing this, since she cannot believe what she is hearing. That's all, folks. If you enjoy the video, subscribe and hit the bell. Thanks. This nonsense makes her furious to the point of starting to release her power. But when she realizes she is restraining herself, she stops, since trying to do something that does not suit her makes her stutter. Yet she believes she needs to say it, even if she does not like it. She thanks him, since thanks to him, they managed to save the students, and also kept the corridor of challenges intact. The MC is surprised to hear this thanks, until he finally understands what is going on, and calls the professor. He says that he probably heard from the rector that the main objective is to make an open library for everyone, and therefore, if it would not be too much of a bother, he would like to receive support in the form of her publications. The professor agrees but asks them to get straight to the main point. She mentions the ancestral artifact that creates a demonic realm, since this research into its applications may take a long time. The risks are considerable, and this is not even the biggest problem, since if it comes to that, they can simply destroy it. Aster even imagines what the real problem is, and she says it is those who will go after the gauntlet, the cult of forbidden magic, the Salvatium. He asks if she said lesbian, and she corrects it to Salvatium, but tells him to stop fooling around, since one more word will have his head torn off. Then she explains that the cult of forbidden magic, Salvatium, as the name suggests, is a union of those who learned forbidden magic, and they operate separately, but the objective is the same, since they want to recreate the demonic realm. She mentions the miserable Frizen, who made this become reality and probably has some connection to the cult of forbidden magic. But since the guy is now dead, she points out that this sect will go after him to recover the artifact. She also says that they will be persistent enough to rival the Declans, and, despite not knowing how strong the MC is, becoming a target of the cult of forbidden magic is a death sentence. The MC imagines the possibility of losing his life, but this excites him, since it means it will be inevitable that he fights a certain person, and in the end, it is not something to worry about too much, since he can simply crush them. He says he will keep everything in mind. The professor is startled by that confident look. Even while in trouble, the MC opens his dimensional storage, since he would like to ask her to study the artifact, and places the gauntlet on top of the table. She realizes that he has very impressive ambitions and assures him that she will study it. At that moment, an employee opens the door calling for Felina and reports that exactly at that moment, the leader of House Declan has arrived. Aster cannot believe it. The carriage transporting the leader draws closer and closer, and both the director and the two professors are already positioned to receive him. Dexter looks straight ahead, since he is facing the boy who is currently the leader of House Declan. He knows he is a genius who received the title of Archmage at 30 years of age and became the leader of the family. However, what is even more well known is that the Declan's atrocities became worse after he became leader. However, since it is only a rumor, he knows he should not believe it so easily. But of one thing he is certain: because of the teachings of the founding director, even royalty appears at his feet when stepping into the academy, and even so, this man arrogantly refuses to step on the ground. At nightfall, there was a fireworks display that left everyone amazed, since the explosions were beautiful. Aster thinks it is a waste of money, although she cannot deny that it is impressive. Meanwhile, Farron tells the director that he personally captured some vermin, and, using his power, takes several heads out of his dimensional storage. These are the leaders of the Weimar. He also says that he brought with him the collateral lineage and the direct ones, and asks if the director is satisfied with this. The MC continues observing from afar, since, as expected, the leader took the heads of the Weimar, but because he knows the absurd power that this guy has, he is not impressed at all, as he is the type of person who would extend his hand to the MC, who even killed members of the Declan family itself. In any case, he thinks the timing is far too perfect, since he had just talked about the Declan family and the Weimar family to his senior the previous night, and on that very day, Farron appears with their heads, and he does not know whether it was luck or if the guy is pathologically meticulous. In any case, the MC knows that the guy is still a human, and that in his past life, he was an incomprehensible existence whose feet he could not even see. But confidently, he sees this leader as nothing more than a huge mountain. Thus, in this new life, he knows that he can climb up to the leader's neck to put an end to him. He knows that what Farron did, a grand display of the Weimar lineage, was quite impressive, but in this case it went a bit beyond that. He will send a direct descendant of the Declans as a student of the academy. In other words, a powerful card known as a hostage, something that only a prestigious house could use. Now, whether the two planned it together or not, the Imperial side immediately announced the enrollment of the third princess in the academy. However, that story is for later, since at the very least they will enter next semester and at most next year. The festival continues, keeping everyone excited. This is the Pistiniki Festival. It is a celebration of victory for the students who were mobilized during the era of the war. The MC imagines that the academy must be treating the incident of the Corridor of Challenges as equivalent to this. But it is also a good excuse to raise the academy's monotonous atmosphere. Perhaps because of that, there is alcohol at a school festival, since this party is a celebration of victory, so the academy allowed it, with only off-duty mercenaries hired for security, who are probably not drinking so openly. One of the men is pleased, since no one is managing to beat him in the drinking competition. Suddenly, someone puts their money on the table. It was Damien, shouting that he also wants to try. Suddenly, the school announces that everyone in the academy must go to the award ceremony, which is about to begin. Because of that, Aster grabs Damien and drags him away. After all, it is time for him to receive his reward. The rector says that he has a few words to say since they will proceed to the prizes, and that the winners are to go up on stage when their names are called. He begins by calling Dahlia, then Damien, Eveline, Chenbi, and lastly, Aster. The MC looks at Evelyn. Since he knows that she is the daughter of the Goldrin Exchange Company, he thinks there is something strange about her, since he does not remember her standing out anywhere in his past life. And, even so, as the witnesses confirmed her deeds, she is being recognized as a contributor. They go to receive the prize, and the MC already knows that it would obviously be a higher rank elixir. The rector offers his profound gratitude for Aster's contribution, and Aster asks if he needs to return the box, since it is not even pretty and is just trash. Dexter warns that if he finds it in the incinerator, he will throw him in as well. The MC imagines that apparently he will have to burn it in secret. With that, the award ceremony came to an end, and the group walked all around, enjoying the festival. After the next fireworks display, the MC becomes pensive, since on the day he builds his tower, he will want to splurge in the same way. Right at the top of the tower, the view would not be much, so they decide to watch from the top floor, where it is possible to see the ground, and they will hold a festival that lasts an entire week. And the finale will be the Sage's Ascension Ceremony, with the great sage Aster riding a wyvern that ushered in a new era for the continent. After that, the next day, an owl appears in his room and he takes the note tied to its leg. The only message written was the usual place, and he immediately realizes it is from his senior. He thinks that this summons on the morning right after the festival was something bold, but he jumps toward the marked location. After arriving, Aster observes that the building has been used since forever and was also used by many mercenaries, but it is abandoned and forgotten by the academy, making it perfect for secret conversations. He announces his arrival, and the rector tells him to enter, even offering tea. The MC asks the reason for being summoned so early, and Dexter says he had a favor to ask and had even mentioned it before. He remembers that the rector did ask for a favor in exchange for the library pass. The old man puts his hand in his pocket, saying it is a simple favor, and shows a letter that must be delivered to a friend of his. The MC does not like this at all, since he senses trouble, and big trouble at that, so he asks where he has to go. The rector says he asked some old companions and managed to find out where his target is, and that he is hiding very well. He says it is in the great forest of Hammern, and Aster already thinks this is a pain. That is because this great forest has been preserved since ancient times, and throughout its vast land, there are not only all kinds of monsters, but also invaluable magical materials, and he wants him to find one person in that place. The old man explains that it will not be difficult, since there are people who live in that area, and if he checks some camps, he will find the person soon. The MC prepares to apologize, since he is not liking this, but the rector interrupts, saying he almost forgot to talk about the reward, and shows that he prepared something quite modest for his hardworking junior. Aster soon notices that there are 2 Ansali's top-rank elixirs, 5 high-rank elixirs, and 10 intermediate-rank elixirs, among other things. The rector asks again what he was going to say after "I'm sorry," and the MC continues his sentence, excited, apologizing, but saying that this time he will take longer to graduate from the academy, since he definitely accepts this mission. After returning to the academy, he reads the letter with the rewards once more and becomes extremely happy, since just looking at it makes him feel good. After all, if he counts the reward he received at the festival ceremony, that gives him 3 of the highest rank elixirs. In addition, he also gained a voucher from the Iricane Artifact Production Workshop. It is something prestigious, where even noble families would have to show respect and wait their turn. The value behind something like that is far too great to refuse, and as expected, the rector had been hiding something. The old man says that originally he intended to call the guy back to the academy, but with the demonic kingdom, the Declan, and all the chaos that had been unleashed, he decided to ask this old friend for help, and emphasizes that this request for help will also be to help the bastard finish his personal duties. The MC, smiling, asks if by any chance there is no consideration. He argued about this job, which looks more like a scam, and wrung out some extra compensation and almost got beaten to death for being too fair. He takes a deep breath and starts thinking about using the top rank elixir to increase his mana capacity, but since he now has 3, he does not need to be so fixated on his mana capacity. A technique created by taking the strengthened bodies of the knights due to ether as a reference is called the mana body. He knows that it is a technique that allowed him to surpass the limits of a mercenary in his past life, and, therefore, it is time to improve his fragile body. Now, he will be a mage with a body equal to that of a knight, and in his case, he also has collision formulas, interference formulas, and countless techniques that he still cannot use. With all of this, he concludes that he can reach an even higher place than in his past life. He goes to a quiet place and begins to meditate. After finishing, he takes a pill and swallows it. Immediately, his body overflows with incredible energy. He knows that the breathing technique is always the same, but this time, he will put every drop of the highest rank elixir directly into his body. He needs to let the mana enter every joint, every muscle fiber, and every nerve. This is his greatest objective. However, he feels a colossal pain and thinks this is a drag, since his fire mark is coming into action once again. He gets pissed because he almost lost his focus, but he also gets excited because if the fire mark is active, then he only wants to know what kind of boost he will receive this time. He calmly continues as planned, since first, he must circulate the mana throughout his entire body, not through the mana circuits, and then finally injects the mana into the muscle fibers, which makes him feel an incredible pain to the point of thinking it is madness, as it feels more like torture, since his muscles seem to be getting torn apart little by little. He questions whether he really needs to feel so much pain, since, unlike his past life, this one is very good. The power becomes increasingly intense under the fire mark, and he screams with all his strength to the point that the Academy almost hears it. After some time, the process finally ends, and he realizes that, for some reason, it seems to have gone beyond simply ending. The durability of his body still cannot fully withstand the potency, but even so, with only his flesh strengthened, he would not lose to a knight. Once his body matures and goes through proper physical training, a mage will finally be able to defeat a knight with his fists. And this will not be a dream. Excited, he bites his finger because he wants to test his regeneration, but the force was so great that it caused a huge tear without him even meaning to. Since he held back, he notices the wound he caused, as he did not plan to go so deep, but he knows it should heal in about 15 minutes. However, before he even finishes thinking that, his injury is already healed. He simply cannot believe it, since it is regeneration at the level of a troll, and this drives him crazy because even in his past life it was not that much. And because of that, he gained an unexpected bonus, since if he includes the secret healing light grimoire he took from Wenji, he would basically be at the same level as Damien's healing, the monster of Blandor. He decides to set this aside, since he felt a very faint mana and believes it came from the blood on the ground. He knows that this mana is familiar and that its nature is similar to his own mana, and therefore believes he can control it. He decides to test light emission magic, but an extremely strong glow appears in front of him, and he cannot believe it, as it goes far beyond common sense, since he can conjure his magic at will, but the origin is not his. This excites him, since if he increases the volume of blood and uses a collision formula, this will reach a completely different level. Then he applies the healing art of the Blandor family. The proliferation formula will be very useful, since it is effective for regenerating blood and flesh. He knows it is better not to get involved with a madman if he can avoid it, and remembers that Lancey is going to the parents' council before the normal classes begin, so he will talk about this at that time. With everything resolved, he decides to call this technique blood magic. After some time, Lancey meets Damien and the MC, feeling happy to see them well, and asks if there is any problem. The young master, excited, replies that there is not, since he is healthy, and therefore she can leave. However, she informs him that his mother asked her to pass along a message and talks about the architectural proposal for the construction of the internal lake and a statue in Blandor that he had requested last time. Since she does not know who helped him, but the design was quite surprising, the proposal itself was decent. The MC continues listening to this, since he knows she is talking about blood, sweat, and tears numbers 1 and 2. Damien, excited, asks her to get straight to the message and she says that the request was denied. The young master becomes frustrated upon hearing this, but she asks him not to give up, since if he stays among the 16 best during the Academy's semi-annual evaluation, then he will be able to do something to change his mother's opinion. Aster quickly realizes what the family matriarch's move is. Lancey says again that if Aster and Chenbi help the young master, the family will certainly reward them appropriately. The MC realizes the mess he is getting into, but even so says that he understands, leaving Damien extremely excited with his crazy expression. After the maid leaves, Chenbi asks Damien how much he understands about the basic subjects of magic. He asks what the hell that is, but his friend simply asks to see his notebook. He opens his backpack and dumps a pile of books onto the table. They are startled by this, since it is going to be hell, and Chenbi asks whether he happened to turn in the assignments the teachers gave on time. He replies that he did. The boy feels relieved, but the MC worries, since he does not know if that is really true, and it gets worse when he sees what was in the young master's notebook. This makes him think that he is getting farther and farther from the formula, and the only good thing is that the boy is not doing badly in culture and history, probably thanks to the education given by the family. Basically, the problem lies in the subjects related to magic, and teaching him would not be impossible, but he is not confident. Damien asks if this is really serious. At that moment, someone approaches, and the MC asks if it is Furio. He, irritated, replies that his name is Furion, and says that he did not want to snoop, but ended up overhearing the conversation, and therefore asks if they are going to help Damien with his studies. Aster replies that they are, and asks why. He says that he might be able to help. The young master is pleased with this, but the MC finds it suspicious, and Furion quickly notices, and therefore says that he is aware that he does not trust him, and despite not wanting to show something, he will have to do so. He shows a compilation of the most recent evaluations given by the Academy, and not only that, but it also contains each of the exams that the teachers administer. From the themes of the questions to the complete evaluation of all classes, everything is on that sheet. Chenbi takes it in his hand and admits to being surprised, finally managing to see a ray of hope. Aster, on the other hand, is not liking this at all, but has no choice but to accept. He says he has a condition and asks the MC to help in the duel that will take place after the semi-annual evaluation, since with his knowledge in battle, it will be more than enough. Aster finds this interesting and gets excited, since being able to hit him, and asks to do it at that very moment, as they can go to the training room. Furion asks them to wait, since the help is not for him, but for someone else. Aster finds this strange, but the boy asks him to follow him to another place. Then, outside the academy, in the city of Haze, Aster asks how far it is, and he says they are almost there. The MC finds it strange, since they pass through several alleys, and he cannot take it anymore, as he is itching to slap him for being arrogant. They finally arrive, and he realizes that it is a private training center, and that, basically, the person must have a lot of money. After walking a little further, Dahlia gives her welcome. Aster realizes who it is. Furion whispers to her whether it really has to be Aster, since he truly found it impressive that he defeated one of the Dolimpa. But even so, he does not think it is good. She replies that no, since she said she does not intend to use her family's influence. Because of that, she stands up and politely asks the MC to accompany her, but he says he has a proposal, since he could use Furion for that, as it would be enough to use him to train until the evaluation ends, since he needs to give classes to Damien. The boy cannot accept this, and asks if Dahlia is really considering such an absurdity. He then points to Aster, since he paid his part of the agreement with the study materials. The MC warns that he has already paid everything he owed, and says that Aster still has not paid for what he did to Chenbi in the corridor of challenges. Dahlia says it is fine, and Furion does not accept that, since they are deciding for him, and even guarantees that he will not accept it. After all, he is a proud descendant of the Dainai family and has a will of his own. The MC, excited, says that if he really is a proud descendant, then the fact is that he himself needs a punching bag at that exact moment and wants to see if he is tougher than the kid from Exeter. Furion thinks it over and turns away, saying that he does not have much time, since the evaluation is approaching, and therefore he is leaving. Aster takes a deep breath, since with this, Chenbi will be able to relax a little, and says that it is fine, since he received the payment, and therefore will fulfill his duty. He asks if she happens to want hand-to-hand training, And she replies yes. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Evelyn is calmly eating with a boy, and she comments that due to the recent incident in the corridor of challenges, customer complaints have increased a lot lately, and apparently, not a single person has managed to obtain a bracelet from the corridor of challenges. He prepares to speak, but she interrupts, saying that according to what she heard, at the very least the preparations for the semester evaluations will be ready next week. He is startled, since he is afraid that she will ask him to steal the evaluations. Evelyn says that this would be a big problem, and that she only mentioned the subject, hoping it would help in that regard, and therefore asks if he understood correctly. He feels pressured by this, until she hands him a paper, asking him to go to a certain place, since there is someone very good at this kind of work there, and then tells him to eat the food before it gets cold. Back to the MC, he continued training with Dahlia. This makes him imagine that in his past life, he would have broken her neck while telling her to stop talking nonsense, and that was how his relationship with her was, since he remembers perfectly the girl saying that that would be his grave. Also, if it were not for the reinforcements at the time, he would have killed her dozens of times. And after she became the mage leader of the Nº1 family, they never met again. Now, forgetting the intrigues of the past and doing the calculations properly, he knows that making her strong is actually a good thing, since the girl went against the Declans even without knowing the reason. This makes him question whether he should perhaps bring the future forward, since, being honest, if it is not at that moment, he will not have another opportunity to beat her up. With knowledge, he calls Dahlia and asks what she thinks is the most important thing in hand-to-hand combat. She replies that she does not know, since she just wants to learn the move he used against Exter. The MC asks if this is serious, since she is asking for a technique that belongs to him, when in fact, she should find something that suits her. Because of that, he asks her to imagine, on one side, an 8th rank officer against a 9th rank one, and in that case, who she thinks would win. The girl replies that it would be the 8th, since the rank is higher, but Aster immediately says that she is wrong, since basically it is whoever crushes the other's head first, regardless of rank. She becomes confused by this, and he, preparing his power, launches himself in the blink of an eye toward her head, since, in summary, the one who wins is the one who strikes first. After that, later in the afternoon, Aster resumes walking around the academy and imagines that if Dahlia keeps getting beaten like that, she will end up getting strong easily. At that moment, something catches his attention, since he sees Daibi wandering back and forth, which makes him remember the 320 gold coins. The boy remains worried, since this time they want him to tear up the exam papers. But in truth, he wants to bail out because he has no peace at all. He thinks about Evelyn, since this girl has more than enough power to make a certain thing happen. He reads the instructions once more, since he knows that it is actually a perfect opportunity, because what the girl wants is to make connections with the noble families. And if he does the job right, he may also become part of those connections. He arrives at the location and knows what he needs to do, but everything differently. At the same time, the MC continues following him. Dive, already inside, is not sure if the place is correct, since it looks more like an ordinary tea house. The attendant asks what the order is, and he politely asks for the dragon horn tea to be very hot and cold. The four-eyed man says he understands and asks him to wait a bit. Only then does the boy realize that Evelyn was telling the truth, since he would have embarrassed himself if he had said that code in a normal shop. The attendant offers the cup of tea and comments that the boy seems frightened by the atmosphere, since many people, when they hear the term black market, imagine secret locations. But as he can see, no one would imagine that ordinary house as the place of the black market. After saying that, he asks how he found the place. Daiba replies that he only wants to get the exam papers for the basic first-year classes. The man says he understands and mentions that there is someone willing to sell them, so he asks which department he is looking for. Daiba explains that it is the magic department, and the four-eyed man says that, coincidentally, he has scheduled a meeting with the seller next week, so he wants to know if he would like to go along. Daib starts to worry, since it is clear that the guy is trying to drag him into this, so he asks if it is not common mercantile practice to verify the seller and inspect the quality of the products, and then says that he will go. After all, there is nowhere left to retreat. The attendant says he understands, and the two continue talking. Meanwhile, Aster keeps watching from afar, since a lot of shit is happening. He imagines that a seller of exam papers conveniently appearing, and at the same time, a buyer also showing up is suspicious. especially since they did not even talk about the price. He decides to check it out himself and takes his mask out of dimensional storage, since it seems he will have to start by robbing the richest people first. After DB leaves, the seller continues with his tea, imagining that the job should end as soon as he leaves Haze, since after stealing the Academy's exam papers, the place will become far too dangerous, but he does not know where he should go. Suddenly, someone asks if he is not taking customers. He looks to the side, since he did not sense any presence, and upon seeing the person's appearance, wonders if it might be one of the elite mages of the Declan family, the Jade Rubies. The MC, already seated, tells him to stop the horrible acting and skip the nonsense about Dragonhorn tea. The seller says that is fine and asks what he is looking for. He replies that he is after a subspace bag. The four-eyed man is startled, since it is probably referring to the subspace bag of Callahan, who was killed at the Academy, but he does not understand why the hell he would be looking for it in that place. Therefore, he says they have never seen that item. Aster then asks what he was talking about with the boy from earlier, since it seems suspicious. The seller grows worried since he does not know what he should answer, but the MC, losing patience, places his hand on the counter and, overflowing with murderous intent, warns that the man's head is very noisy when he is thinking. He feels that absurd pressure and quickly deduces that he is not a simple mage of the Declan family, and therefore says he will be honest, since the student has nothing to do with the Declans. The MC says that he will listen, and therefore, it must be decided whether to hide it or not. Then he tells the two of them to go to the warehouse, but Four Eyes does not know why. He says that he must check the warehouse in person, since if they are hiding something, he will see it for himself. The man remains frightened, since he has no idea what the hell he is supposed to do against someone so intimidating. As he goes down the stairs, the vendor asks if it is really necessary to go that far. The MC asks him not to worry, since if it is for the innocent, nothing will happen, and swears on the name of the Declans. In addition, he emphasizes that anything he says will remain a secret forever, as long as it has nothing to do with the Declan family. He starts to break into a cold sweat and explains that Debbie's job was requested by the daughter of the Goldrin Exchange Company, Evelyn. He himself is just someone who does business for money, so he does not know the exact details, but he thinks she is trying to create a black market at the Academy to buy exam papers. Aster thinks about this girl, since he knows she passes herself off as an exemplary girl, has good relationships with her classmates, and is a model student. Thinking that a student like her is doing this kind of thing behind the scenes already makes his stomach churn, especially knowing that someone is stuck working as a private tutor, which does not suit her at all, while she makes money so easily, and the more he thinks about it, the angrier he gets. Sometime later, the vendor says they have arrived, and after opening the door, the MC realizes there is quite a lot of stuff and says that, despite appearing to have no problems, the family must check carefully, and for that reason, asks to prepare 2 subspace bags, since he will take any suspicious item. The man becomes extremely furious, as he is being robbed right in front of his face. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Damien continues studying, since if you are managing to execute it, that means your answer is correct. Chenbi explains that it is not quite like that, since it makes no sense to maintain the spell when the stabilization formula was removed. The two continue arguing while Furion thinks that place is hell. He knows that Damien is definitely a genius, but he is the type of genius who lacks full common sense. Basically, common sense is being completely denied, and according to the calculations, it is clearly impossible, yet the boy makes it look easy. Then he thinks that Aster is even teaching Dahlia properly, and wonders if, by any chance, he is corrupting the girl. Suddenly, Dahlia appears, and the boy is startled when he sees the state of her face. He becomes extremely furious, thinking the MC is a wretch for doing this to his master. Thus, 2 weeks pass. Damien is exhausted from studying so much, but Chenbi, still assisting, asks Furion how the parts they were observing are going. He replies that everything is fine. Damien gets excited, since that means he got everything right, and the two confirm it, as they indeed answered everything correctly. Furion imagines that it was an intense week of sweat and tears, and that, even though they were basic problems, they were still a lot of work. In addition, he thinks about how Aster is doing as well. The MC, at that same moment, feels that someone is talking about him as his ear starts to itch. Then he looks down and comes face to face with Deeb, who was walking in a suspicious manner. He notices this, and can only imagine wanting to beat the boy until he passes out. He starts following him since he would love to cause a scene with Evelyn and Dibe, but knows that for now, it is better to make sure that people will buy the exam papers. After the boy arrives at the location, the MC takes a crystal and announces that it is showtime. Dibe on the inside says that he managed to get 4 main magic subjects for the basic first-year class students, in addition to 2 general education courses, with events and evaluation methods for the practical exam. The girl's security with the envelope says that the paper quality, the official seal, and even the mana pattern inside are definitely from the academy. Evelyn comments that, apparently, the merchandise is correct and says that, as promised, she will continue giving him opportunities in addition to the support the company provides. Debo likes hearing this, since now his family will no longer be able to ignore him. She warns that she will examine everything carefully and get in touch. Then, from that moment on, he will be in the position of distributor of examination papers for clients. Daibe thanks her and leaves. Evelyn, after that, says the boy really is an idiot and asks her bodyguard if everything is in order with the work. He replies that yes, and that in a few days, all the work will be transferred to Daibe's name and the Pingroove Exchange Company. She orders them to proceed without mistakes, since the only reason they used the idiot was precisely for that, and asks the 2 of them to go out to dinner. The MC, observing through the window, concludes that the girl is definitely rotten, but the scheme is on another level, and he does not know if there is a good way to deal with the situation, since he also needs to finish the job and make Evelyn never do something like that again. He imagines that he recorded everything with the crystal orb, but it would be a waste to use it at that moment, since it always crushed things and caused a scene. But that specific situation is complicated. He checks the room and something catches his attention. Then, he picks up a pen, since he thought of a way to lead her onto the right path. He also takes a sheet of paper and starts writing, imagining that his skills have not yet grown rusty. He used to copy many calligraphies when he was young and never thought he would do something like that again. Then, he takes the stamp and feels proud of himself, since with that, Evelyn will become a good person. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Dahlia continues her training, and the phrase, "the first strike wins," sticks in her head like glue, since, in other words, the magic that activates faster and can be cast unconsciously wins. This thought leaves her extremely excited, since even a genius dies if their head gets crushed. The next day at the academy, the teacher tells them to put their pens down and place their hands on their heads, and the student in the back must collect everyone's exams and take them to the front. Some nobles go up to Deminem, asking which theory he used for question 3. He replies that it was the theory of God, and circling his paper, says that everyone should pay more attention in class, just like he does. Everyone finds it incredible how much of a genius he is, and Evelyn just watches from afar, since the first transaction was a success. This is because Deminin is the eldest son of Viscount Haramir, and this family controls the main grain warehouses of the kingdom. She knows she will secure priority in buying the cereal fields thanks to the leaked exam questions, and she even has 4 deals like that happening at the same time, and this is only the beginning. At that moment, an instructor opens the door, and this catches Evelyn's attention, since another one of her clients looks downcast. The instructor tells Deminin to follow him. The boy doesn't understand what is happening, but the man, once again, tells him to follow, since the principal is waiting for him. Evelyn becomes desperate about what might be happening. The next morning, the principal informs all first-year students to gather immediately in the Great Hall for an emergency meeting. They don't understand, since apparently 3 scandals involving the exams happened that time, and they wonder who could have done something like that. Evelyn doesn't understand how this could have happened, since she was meticulous and didn't leave a single trace, and she wonders if it might have been Diba, although she doesn't really believe it, since the guy is slow, but not an idiot. Suddenly, the teacher tells everyone to be quiet and says that apparently the rumors are already spreading and he will clarify the situation for those who don't know. In summary, many students were caught cheating during the freshman semester exams, and it is truly regrettable that such a scandal occurred at the academy. He says that the main suspect has been identified, and it is Dave along with 4 accomplices. All 5 were expelled immediately, and the academy will also demand full compensation for the damages. In addition, he regrets to say that it was not the faculty who uncovered the scandal. It was the work of a student with an unshakable sense of justice. And since everyone is gathered, he calls this student to congratulate him for this courage and points to Evelyn so she can step forward. She is confused about what is going on and says that she was not responsible for reporting those people. People ask her not to be modest and say she should even have reasons to be proud. She doesn't understand what the hell is happening and is not stupid enough to get caught in this cheating scheme. The teacher announces that the award ceremony will begin, and the MC, observing from the back, finds this spectacle wonderful. He tells her not to stray from the righteous path and to remain alive with a noble heart. After all, she is the heroine of the failures, a benevolent judge who corrects the corrupt. A week has passed since this reform. Someone shouts that the rankings have been announced, and immediately everyone runs to see, since they are intrigued. Chenbi asks what the results were, but the two cry when they see that Damien placed 18th. The MC tells them to pay more attention, since Deminem is well above them in 7th place. At that moment, the instructor apologizes, since that is the wrong list, and puts up the updated ranking, which makes the two emotional, since in the new ranking, Damien is in 16th place, and they celebrate because the boy managed to pass after a lot of studying. Aster finds this perfect, since he will be able to obtain the proliferation formula, as he went through a lot to get it. Suddenly, Chenbi calls out to him and wonders if he might have the talent to be a teacher and, after graduating, could stay in the advanced class to apply as an assistant. MC tells them to shut up but becomes worried that he might have spoken too loudly, so he asks if they know that an assistant was also involved in the incident. Chenbi says he is aware, and the poor guy was so desperate that he sold the exam answer papers just to survive, and that shows how miserable the life of an assistant is. Then Aster asks if they know how long it takes for an assistant to become an associate professor. He guesses maybe 3 or 4 years, but does not understand why so many questions are being asked. MC mentions Professor Perun, since he wants to know if he will really become a professor like him. Chenbi says that, in some way, it seems rewarding. Damien keeps celebrating since all his effort was not in vain. MC turns to his friend and says that if he really wants to teach, there is a way, since he just needs to become an archmage, someone so powerful that no one would dare to challenge him. That way, he can train others mercilessly, as strictly as he was with the idiot Damien. Chenbi becomes thoughtful about this since becoming an archmage would be the ultimate goal. Aster likes seeing him thoughtful since it is good to dream big, and after what he did for Damien, becoming an assistant would be a waste since he is far too talented for that, and he truly wishes his friend becomes an archmage. After that, already at night, in a tavern, someone enters the place and heads toward a table. The man sitting there says that he finally showed up, and the blonde guy finds it funny that he is always hanging out in all kinds of bars. Kellogg finds that amusing, since his friend spends his life digging in the ground. The blonde guy tells him to stop joking since he needs his help, but the man asks what for and if he wants him to infiltrate the academy or something like that. He explains that ancient ruins were discovered in the Hamlin Forest. Kellogg hears that and smiles, since he knows it is going to be a huge headache. A few days later, MC's group meets with Lancey to receive the reward, and she asks if they are talking about the propagation method and says it would not be particularly difficult, but the main formula would be complicated, although there are some publicly available for academy exchanges, and among them, she will provide a high-rank formula. MC admits that he did not expect to receive a high-level formula and that it was definitely an unexpected gain. The maid calls Chenbi's attention and says she did a brief investigation and discovered that apparently there are some problems within his family, and asks if he is aware of it. He says yes, and that things have been improving lately. She explains that the Blandor family can resolve everything for him, and not only that, since if he wants, they can provide a better environment for his family. The boy thinks about it and thanks her, although he refuses the offer since he is doing fine in his own way. She asks him not to take it as something rude or as if he were a burden, and he says that is not it, since he wants to keep being Damien's friend forever. Lancey feels happy hearing that, and MC, observing that conversation, concludes that he himself is definitely the only trash in that place. Then Chenbi asks if he can request something else, and she tells him to go ahead. He says that if he ever gets the chance, he wants to study magic at the Blandor family's house because he intends to broaden his horizons. She asks if that is really enough for him, and Chenbi says that it obviously is. With that conclusion, the employee reports it to Julie, and she asks if Chenbi really said that, since apparently her son found a great friend, and since the boy taught Damien very well, she believes she should help him a little more. With that said, she declares that from that moment on, the Blondor house formally becomes the main sponsor of the student Chenbi. He cannot believe it when he reads that announcement. In the end, the semester evaluation ends with results that satisfy everyone. After that, Zira stands before her class and says that from that day on, they will enter the preparatory period for interpersonal combat. This applies only to the basic class, and all general education classes will be completely suspended, with all lessons focused on practical combat. However, she emphasizes that all training will be left at the discretion of the students, and the preparatory classes will continue as usual, although they are not mandatory. Arzen asks if they will really be able to choose whether or not to attend classes, and she confirms, also reinforcing that they will be able to choose to train at home. In addition, she asks them not to worry so much, since the teachers will fully take care of the preparatory classes, and at least a large number of active Grade 5 combat mages will be present. The MC becomes intrigued by this, since they are changing the schedule to combat preparation, and, from the looks of it, the teachers are hiding something. At nightfall, the owl goes to the MC and delivers a note, setting up a meeting at 8 at night. He starts wondering if something might have happened. He arrives at the location at the agreed time and is surprised, since the warehouse has changed a lot in the short time he has not been there, and even a barrier strong enough to hide the place has been put up. That place has become a complete hideout, and he thinks it is good, since with all that space he will be able to test the proliferation formula he learned. He releases a drop of mana that multiplies intensely. He notices that even the divided rubies attracted ambient mana and perfectly replicated the original, but the magical power is insufficient. Suddenly, the director appears asking what the hell he is doing. The MC realizes that he has finally arrived, and the old man comments that apparently that mana belongs to the boy and is curious whether he can use any magic within the barrier. He activates some abilities and says yes. The old man is shocked seeing this, and shouts that this is absurd, since he should not be able to store such refined mana and cast it right afterward, and therefore wants to know where the hell he learned that. He gets excited by this question and says he will explain, but first he wants to ask a favor. Dexter thinks he is bold, since he is asking the director himself to be a test dummy. The MC thinks this is perfect, since he has found a powerful punching bag, so he asks to begin, but first wants his master to raise his guard. The old man says he does not care about that, since he can try as much as he wants and will not even be able to touch a single hair on his head. Aster says that is fine, and decides to fuse the rubies again until the mana is sufficient. The director is startled by what he is seeing, and asks what the hell he thinks he is going to do with all that power. The MC warns that Art is an explosion and unleashes all his power against the director, which causes catastrophic destruction to the barrier. After the dust settles, the MC finds that power disappointing. However, the director appears and, furious, demands honesty, since he wants to know where the hell the boy comes from, and even says that his mana was purer than anyone else's. But even so, it goes far beyond what he can understand. The MC hears this and replies that he is a completely normal person and asks if he is calling him a great demon that will possess someone. The director says that their concepts of normal are completely different, and the magic he saw is so strange that he can only understand its basic principle. And leaving that aside, he wants to know where the red orbs came from. The MC thanks him for the question and, showing his middle finger, says it came from there. This disrespect enrages the director to the point that he gives the MC a smack on the head, and soon after, Aster asks why he was called. The old man says that there is something he wants to talk about regarding the forest, and places a crystal on the table, since he needs to show it first. A strong light moves toward the MC, who becomes frightened and asks what that is. Now, about the great forest of Hammern. Since ancient times, this forest has remained untouched. All kinds of monsters inhabit the place. Humans are creatures that adapt, and even in the forest, they manage to survive, and only elite mercenaries can operate within the great forest. The MC is watching through the crystal that the mercenaries of the Great Forest are trembling with fear. But as far as he knows, this is only natural, and he does not understand what kind of creature is appearing, since it seems to be undead, and that is not common. The director says that now that he has seen it with his own eyes, he should understand, and if common undead move because of the body's persistent memory, then the conclusion is different. Aster says that apparently they move by the soul. After all, undead are self-born, which means that there are ancient ruins in the Great Forest where the creatures were sealed. The director confirms and says they are destroyers, the name given to the most impure among all impure things. The destroyer sealed in the ancient ruins has been freed, and vengeful spirits have risen from the depths after it. The old man says that it is an urgent situation, and, among his disciples, none can depart immediately, and this problem must be resolved in at most 2 days. And he tells the MC that even if he refuses, he will not remove the reward, and that he should consider it a gift for the new generation. However, Aster interrupts and asks if, in case he agrees, there will be an additional reward. The old man confirms, since everything depends on the boy's will, and this is not a situation where material temptation should be used, since lives are at stake, until he is startled when the MC says he agrees without even thinking. He knows that his senior is worried about his friend, and apparently will not back down even if it costs his life, and it may not be a moral idea, but he is not so rotten as to negotiate with another person's life. The director is moved by these words, and Aster imagines that even if he had been forbidden to go, he would go anyway. He looks down, since his fire mark in his heart is becoming more intense, because he knows that what he needs to learn is in the forest, so there is definitely no way not to go after it. They leave the hideout, and the old man hands over a teleportation ticket and tells him to show it, since they will clear the passage without delay. He also gives a cloak artifact with protective magic. Aster asks if the director will keep anything, since he is giving so many things so easily. Dexter tells him to stop talking, since the moment is coming and it is too late for preparation. Lastly, he tells him to take another thing and shows the symbol of the new moon, the mark of Sackwall. The MC does not fully understand what it is, and he says that the boy will probably hide his identity with a mask or use perception suppression magic, and with that mark, his friend will not lose track unnoticed. The MC is surprised since he got it exactly right. The old man says that based on the results of the battle and the final exam, he will register everything under his name, but asks about the Blandor house. Aster thinks about it and says he will handle it on his own, so he leaves a note saying that he is going out to train and that there is no need to worry. Chenbi does not believe it, and Damien, excited, says that he also wants to train, since that way he will be able to go out as well. After that, in Greentown, a city near the Great Forest of Hammern, the merchants tell them to hurry since it is almost nightfall, and, from what they heard, there has been another outbreak of monsters after decades. The man thinks the imperial bastards are idiots, since they do nothing and still charge a lot of taxes. His friend tells him to stop complaining so they do not get into trouble. Meanwhile, at the tavern, Oberon keeps thinking about what he should do, because his old friend will help, but not personally, as he will send someone, and he becomes more and more worried. At that moment, a man approaches and asks if he has thought it through. Then he politely asks him to spare him, since asking him to enter the Great Forest of Hammern is the same as ordering him to take his own life. The boy says that there is an escort contract between the 4th camp and the city, and, since he has already received an advance, he cannot cancel it. Riley says he knows, but asks if he should not find another guide, since he does not want to die, and therefore apologizes. After all, monsters are appearing all the time. Oberon becomes downcast, and the man, seeing this, smiles, since it is about to begin. The back and forth between the camp and the city is too insane, and, if he goes, he will go with a powerful mage and may take the opportunity to earn a lot of money. After all, it is enough to get rid of a naive boy like Oberon, and it will add even more gains along the way. Suddenly, someone joins the table. It was the MC in disguise. The boy asks who he is, but the MC asks if he is Oberon, a disciple of Leheim, whose nickname is Dexter, and who is the director of the academy. The boy confirms, and Rayleigh gets excited since the escort has arrived, and suggests taking the map he has to the Great Forest. He places the map on the table and says that he is trusting that map as if it were his own life. Oberon thanks him and says he feels more at ease since he has someone familiar with his mentor as company. The man prepares to leave, but Aster tells him to stop and warns that he will give him only 1 second to do so, otherwise he will die. The man asks what he means by that, but since he delayed for more than 1 second, the MC lands a punch on him and begins to deliver several blows while he is falling to the ground. Then he says that 1 second has passed. Oberon watches this and wonders if they will actually be able to destroy the destroyer. Meanwhile, in the forest, a man arrives at the location and calls out to Mole and says that the place is like an oven. Then he asks what the situation is. The blonde boy replies that it is better to see it with his own eyes. Upon seeing the situation, the guy questions why the seal has not yet broken and what happened to the spell. He says that it is working, but apparently it will take more time than expected. Kellogg finds it strange since the aura of death is everywhere, and that means the seal is broken. So he does not understand why the creature has not awakened even after casting the breaking spell. Mole reinforces that, either way, there is still work to be done. His colleague realizes that he is referring to the ancient war mage, and most likely, he must be searching for the destroyers. The blonde boy says that he will need to maintain the breaking spell and therefore wants to know if he will be able to deal with that mage alone. He asks if that is some kind of joke, since this is a hunt, and he has numerous heads stored in his subspace from war mages. The MC's group enters the forest with Oberon as the leader. As for Rayleigh, after being beaten badly, he joins the group. The boy believes that in the end, everything is going well, and minutes earlier, he was racking his brain trying to figure out how to save the guide. And when he looks to the side, he sees how incredible the MC is, since by height, they are the same age, and he solves problems without even breaking a sweat, and he has already earned the nickname New Moon. At this moment, Aster asks the guide if, by any chance, the luggage is heavy, and if he wants him to store the items in subspace. The man thanks him and says it is not necessary, since the backpack contains emergency supplies that he may need at any moment. The MC notices that the guy is still looking for an excuse to steal, even while being in that cursed forest. At that moment, they hear a very loud noise and the guide shouts for them to be careful. Several goblins riding wolves are running toward them, and the guide cannot understand how they got there, since they are still far from the second camp. Oberon becomes worried since the monsters are fast and he needs to find a way to block them all, until he looks up and sees several red particles. The MC gets his attention and tells him to raise the shield. The skill rushes toward the monsters, who do not understand what it is, but in the next instant the entire forest explodes from the impact, to the point that the guide is startled since, when he looks ahead, he sees that the monsters were simply completely vaporized. Because of this, he calls out to the MC and asks, please, to store the heavy items in the subspace storage. This is because, after witnessing that power, he realized that it is madness to try to steal anything. The MC notices this and replies that he can do so. The afternoon goes by, and he keeps killing monsters one after another. He also reflects on whether the appearance of so many monsters is because of the destroyers, since he has never seen goblins become so buff, and even more so over 2 meters tall. The guide asks them to take a closer look, and, after analyzing the body, says that the goblins must live near the second camp, and that the guides call them Goblins Kenti, and the fact that they are so far away can mean 2 things. The first is that they are expanding their territory, and the second is that something might be chasing them, but he believes it is the second option. This is because the claws are covered in dust and tree bark, and the soles of their feet are all torn, which means they were running from something. Therefore, he suggests taking the safest route, since goblins hunt in groups and are at the top of the food chain. The MC asks if he was perhaps frightened by something like that. Rayleigh apologizes, saying he is not doubting his abilities, but believes they should avoid unknown variables. Aster agrees, after all unexpected risks are the most dangerous, and suggests following that plan. He thinks it is obvious since Rayleigh's instincts are accurate. Even with his wide sensing range, that area is full of interference, and even so, the guy managed to find the ideal route to avoid almost everything. Because of that, he concludes that the guy is more competent than he imagined, and that he can trust him as a guide for now. After night falls, Rayleigh says that they are apparently almost there, and that once they cross the swamp, they will reach the first camp, and therefore, they should rest a bit while he himself goes to check the area before crossing. The two stay around the campfire, and the MC thinks that he cannot blame the boy for being anxious, since taking the safe route cost an entire day. Oberon comments that they do not have time to stand still, since the monster wave will arrive for sure, and they need to find and kill the destroyers before they get out of control. Suddenly, they feel a very strong pressure, and the guide appears shouting that they need to run immediately, since the ruler of the swamp is heading toward them. There is a hell located within the great forest of Hamlin, a place known as the Depths, and one of the ancestral species that crawl from there is the ruler of the swamp. The guide explains all of this and says that no one truly knows why this ancestral species left the depths to settle into the swamp of the great forest, and he still cannot believe it appeared so easily, since it had not left the swamp for hundreds of years. The MC asks if they cannot simply go around it and cross the swamp carefully, since even if it claims the entire swamp as its territory, the forest seems enormous. Rayleigh replies that this is impossible, since the creature is persistent, and the moment they step into the water, it will track them by scent to the ends of the earth. Oberon asks how long it would take if they changed the route. The guide says they cannot simply go around the edge and will have to make a huge detour. There is a reason why guides go through the trouble of finding a direct path through the swamps, since this would add at least 10 days or maybe even a month. And if they do that, they will probably skip the first and second camps and go straight to the third. The MC sees how Oberon reacted to this and says that it is fine. The guide asks if they will recalculate the route, but Aster refuses, saying they will move straight through the swamps. They remain silent for a moment, and the guide tries to explain once again the level of danger of the ancestral species, since it is a monster that has devoured numerous soldiers, mages, and knights. The MC says that apparently there was a misunderstanding, and Riley feels more relieved, since he had thought that the MC really wanted to move straight through the swamp. Aster says that is obviously not the case, since they are not just moving forward, and in fact says that they will hunt this ancestral species. The guide does not believe this absurdity, and Oberon tells the MC that he does not need to do this because of him. After all, he is already grateful just for having accompanied him this far, and there is no reason to take such a big risk. Aster replies that when something needs to be done, it is simply done, since he cannot hesitate when the time comes to kill the destroyers. He also questions what he would do if he had to kill his own master along with the monsters. The boy does not know how to respond, so Aster takes a deep breath and says that this is his final decision and that they will hunt the Lord of the Swamps the next morning before moving forward. Oberon becomes thoughtful about what he just heard and stands up, saying that he can help, explaining that his talent has not fully blossomed yet, but his overclock ability can be useful, temporarily pushing a target's latent potential to its absolute limit. The MC finds this very interesting and asks him to explain more about it. After daybreak, Oberon remains by the campfire, channeling the maximum of his ability. At that moment, the MC appears and says he needs to be diligent, especially when there is an idiot who wants to become wyvern food early in the morning. Then he asks which tree the guide likes the most. Rayleigh does not understand the question, and he explains that next time he tries to run away, he will tie him to a tree to become easy prey for the wyverns, so he should choose his favorite tree to be tied to. The guide cannot believe such absurdity and says he will not try to run away anymore. With everything settled, they eat, and the MC realizes they are prepared because they are at their peak, but he knows there is something even more important. So he asks if the boy is okay. Oberon says yes, and the guide, terrified, says he is not ready at all. The MC tells the guide to stay further back, and Oberon does the same, since they are about to begin. He goes to the swamp and reflects that, as far as he knows, the moment someone enters the monster's territory, it tracks them with deadly precision, so he cuts his finger and lets the blood fall into the water. The two are startled by the aura approaching, and Aster tells it to come out and receive its guests. Immediately, the water explodes, and the ancestral monster stands before him. He knows the moment has arrived, and Oberon activates his overclock ability to further enhance the MC's power. He finds this feeling of liberation incredible, since it has been a while since he last felt it. The monster attacks anyway and lands a direct hit, which leaves the guide frightened, calling out for the MC. However, the ancestral creature looks up and sees Aster flying with several active magic circles. He celebrates, since thanks to this situation, he managed to break through a barrier. Previously, Oberon explains that he does not understand the mechanics behind total liberation, and they say it releases a potential beyond all limits, but he finds it hard to define. Because of that, he needs to follow this rule, since total liberation only lasts 5 minutes, and it is dangerous to go past that time. The MC remembers all of this, and is more than aware that 5 minutes is more than enough time to have a little fun. The monster finds itself even more cornered when it falls into flames from the second stage of ignition. From afar, Rayleigh tries to understand what kind of magic this is, since the flames are burning on the water, and, sweating cold, he begins to believe that Aster really will defeat the boss. However, the monster changes position, and the guy shouts for him to be careful because the creature is going to roar. The power dissipates around him, and the MC realizes that the roar interrupted the natural flow of mana, but he expected nothing less from the ruler of the swamp. Immediately, the subordinate shouts not to look into the creature's eyes for too long, because 3 seconds of contact are enough to freeze mana. Aster calls him a bastard, since information like that should have been said in advance. Rayleigh remembers the past and how he could not believe the stories. His boss had said that the ruler of the swamp was a monster almost impossible to subdue, that its scream seemed to distort mana, and that its gaze completely froze the magic of the target, while the rigid skin hidden beneath its thick fur could repel even the ether of a knight. His boss, confident, used to say that the best move was to never set foot in the swamp of death. He realizes that he was the true nightmare, someone who only thought about running and did not care if the mages died, since planning his escape was the best means of survival. But, currently, he thinks differently. Since the MC is clearly different, he feels confident because he is a mage who can trust the power he possesses. However, he gets startled, since, out of nowhere, Aster warns that the two of them will have a little talk later. He finds that funny, but asks him to survive first. The MC concludes that now he cannot look into the monster's eyes for more than 3 seconds, so it is time to take care of this annoying situation. He charges forward, just like the ancestral creature. However, he dodges and throws his blood, which hits the monster's eyes directly, forcing it to close them, unable to see properly. After opening them again, the MC is already prepared to make his attack and lands his electric collision strike with great power. Aster gives his compliments, since the creature is tougher than it looks. The monster prepares to counterattack, but he finds it far too slow and warns that it is time to put an end to that ugly beast. And, since he was entertained for a while, he is going to show something interesting. The power grows more and more intense in his hands, and, getting close enough, he throws his explosive annihilation ability into the creature, which explodes from the inside out, emitting beams of light through every possible hole and causing colossal destruction in the swamp. Beneath the sunlight, the MC reflects that it is still not enough, since a mere monster is not strong enough to test his limits, and thinks about Pahern, because if he had not been so exhausted in that fight, he would have liked to see the bastard's face upon seeing his explosive annihilation. He is aware that the guy would probably block it, but he definitely would not be smiling. After all, no matter how resistant the force field is, that violet explosion tears through everything in its path, and that is why it has that name. At that instant, the two of them run to see how Aster is, and all the MC imagines is that the next time he fights his target, things will be different. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the forest, Kellogg is surprised, because she did not imagine that the MC would actually kill an ancient creature she used as bait, and she thinks he is a rare lunatic, since he tore out the creature's eye in the middle of the fight. However, she finds it strange, because although she knows he is a mage, something does not add up, since the energy he released is far too high for the mana he was using, and he also seems to be a martial artist. In any case, she knows that she also has enough strength to defeat the Lord of the Swamp, but even so, the explosion she witnessed was quite a surprise. Besides that, her hand is trembling, and this is hard to believe, because for a moment she felt fear, This makes her extremely excited because it is something absolutely incredible. Ancient war mages are just trophies, but the MC is different and she is dying to hunt him, until she realizes that this is not the feeling of a hunter toward her prey. It is more like her target is also a hunter, a kindred spirit who understands the thrill of the hunt. This makes her wonder who is the more avid hunter between the two, and she decides that she will need to put a little more effort into her preparations. Back at the swamp, a campfire had been lit, and the MC finally wakes up. He asks how long he was asleep, and Oberon says it was only for 2 hours. He then explains that if he is feeling dizzy, it is because of the side effects of the overclock, and since the duration was short, the pressure should be minimal, and he will feel like this for the rest of the day. The MC reflects that he feels like he is dying and sees how bad the situation is, since if the two of them had not been together, he probably would have drowned in the swamp water. In any case, he asks about Rayleigh, and as soon as he says that, the guy appears, saying that he will not run anymore. Aster tells him to stop with the nonsense, because he wants to know where he was. He explains that for most of the time, he was looking at the Lord of the Swamp. Aster does not understand what that was for, and he replies that he wanted to see if there was anything valuable and, without beating around the bush, asks what he plans to do with the creature's corpse. The MC realizes what this is about, and not caring about it, tells him to take it as payment, and even offers the subspace bag to carry it. Rayleigh's eyes sparkle, and he thanks him for the gift. The MC knows that the bag he has plenty of space, so he only gives him one of the bags he got from the black market vendor. Oberon asks if he is sure about that, since the remains of that creature are worth a fortune. Aster does not care much, since the guide also needs to get his share. He is surprised, because he was taught that greed hinders training and twists the soul, and, from what he has noticed, the MC is quite noble, does not care about material wealth, and is far too considerate toward others. Aster thinks that is a load of crap, and is aware that this creature is famous for having fur that is excellent at blocking ether, which could even be used to make armor. But, sometimes, materials lose their properties after the monster dies, and it is clear to see that, since Rayleigh's knife is cheap and is cutting through the hide with ease. In other words, it is worthless trash. Oberon asks what the plan is, since they are behind schedule, but Rayleigh had said that they could rest for one more day. The MC does not understand why they would need more rest, since, after all the crap they went through, he is dying to get moving. Night arrives, and they continue their journey. Sometime later, Rayleigh says that they have finally arrived, since they are in front of Base Camp 1, and everything is so dark because they do not light the campfires at night, since the light attracts monsters. He asks them to look for the camp chief, because they will need rooms. Aster questions who this so-called camp chief is. He explains that it is the group of mercenaries that owns the camp, and they keep a portion of each mercenary's materials. They are basically the local lords. In a way, they are glorified bandits. Suddenly, he gets startled when he hears a voice say that he has gotten bolder for calling them bandits. Rayleigh looks up and is startled when he sees that it is the camp chief. Oberon explains that the guy is Fixer, the chief of Camp 1. The guy jumps down from the top of the wall and lands in front of Aster. Then he extends his hand and asks if, by any chance, he does not know how to greet someone, since he is only saying hi. The MC greets him, and a loud crack comes from the old man's hand, making him ask what the hell he is doing, squeezing so hard. Aster apologizes, since he has seen all kinds of weird things and is too old for these childish power struggles. Oberon gets worried, since he is sure that the crack he heard was some bone breaking. In any case, Aster asks what led the chief to personally appear outside to greet them. Fixer says he has a proposal, since he heard that they are returning to Base Camp 4. Oberon is startled and asks how he knew that. He indirectly says that he heard a certain talkative explorer commenting about it, and even found out about his plan to deceive a naive mage. Rayleigh does not know where to put his face. Fixer says again that his intentions are simple, since he only wants to go with them to that camp. That is because he has an idea of what is going on there, and the camp chiefs have their own ways of staying informed. If Base Camp 4 falls, that camp will be next, and they will have to fight. The MC realizes that it is not a bad request, since the more help, the better. He gets ready to answer, but Oberon cuts in, saying that he refuses this proposal. This leaves Aster furious, wanting to understand what that idiot thinks he is doing. The camp chief asks if he heard that right. The boy explains that the area around the 4th base camp has long since become a land of death, and he does not know if he has heard, but the reality is much worse than he can imagine. Fixer has an idea of what he means and asks if, by any chance, he is telling him not to go because it is a suicide mission. Oberon takes a deep breath and confirms it, since that is exactly it. At that moment, Fixer releases all his power and even calls the boy an arrogant young mage, since he is no one to decide that, because he has survived until now by relying on his sword. He may look like a despicable mercenary, but he has things to protect and limits he will never cross, and that is why he wants to know by what right he is being stopped, and why a brat can defend his home, but he himself cannot. Oberon is startled by this, but the guy tries to calm down and says he expected more from Leheim's disciple, but in the end, he only knows how to talk crap. He says he will find a place for them to sleep, and the MC says he will take a bath first, since he is soaked from the swamp. Rayleigh also hurries, and before they enter, Aster turns around and calls Oberon a stubborn brat. The night goes by, and once inside the tents, he realizes that his body feels much lighter. He sees that everyone is asleep and decides to go somewhere else. To the camp chief's tent. Fixer asks what he is doing awake at that hour. The MC answers that it is nothing much, since he only wanted to talk, and asks how old the chief is. He answers that he will turn 50 the following year. Aster says he can see that the old man is planning to go to the 4th camp no matter what, and because of that, he asks why he does not accompany them. He believes he did not stay sulking because of what some shitty brat said, since, in the end, it is better for them to go together. Fixer points out that, as far as he knows, that mage is the one in charge, but the MC says that it is just a front and that he is not like the other brats around there. He remembers the ether he saw when the guy lost his patience and knows that it is hard to find a knight with that kind of power. Fixer wastes no time and asks if, by any chance, he wants to use his men as human shields. Aster does not deny it and does not see any sense in refusing help at a time like this. The old man thinks about it and starts considering that it was a formal request. Aster says once again that he is giving him what he wants and does not understand what else he needs. The guy says he needs an escape route. The MC does not understand what that means, and he explains that only the veteran mercenaries will go to the 4th base camp, so he will send the younger ones out of the great forest. Aster finds that touching, since he is crawling toward death for the brats, and the guy confirms it, since he is desperate. In any case, for the escape route, he will need Rayleigh, who is a scout. Although that subordinate has a terrible temper, he is the one who knows the forest best and is willing to trade the scout he has for him. The MC does not understand why there is so much complication, and he answers that the reason is the ancient creature in the swamp, and the scout they have is not skilled enough to find a path around that creature. Aster tells him not to worry, since, if that is the problem, it has already been solved. The guy does not understand what that means, and the MC asks him to think about how they reached the 1st base camp, since if they had gone around the swamp, they would have ended up at the 3rd camp. The old man asks if that means the ancient creature retreated. Aster points out that actually, it went somewhere else, more specifically, to the afterlife, and he personally sent it there. Fixer no longer even knows how to react to that. The next day in the morning, some soldiers order the furniture to be burned, since they can make more later. Aster just watches and asks if, by any chance, the inspection is finished. The old man says yes, since the carcass he saw is definitely from the ancient creature of the swamp, and with that confirmed, he asks who the hell he is. Aster says he is just an employer and still wants to know whether he has made his decision or not. Fixer says yes, but only asks him to guarantee that the young ones leave safely and, with that said, asks what he wants after all and whether, by any chance, it really is to use them as human shields. The MC says he already said it before. They will escort them to the 4th base camp, and after that, they are free to do whatever they want. Then he says he has one more thing to say, since he does not want so much formality. After all, the two of them only have 2 years of difference, and no one cares that they are getting older. Fixer gets irritated by that mockery, since he can clearly see that the MC is much younger, and it is impossible for them to have only 2 years of difference. Only then does a theory cross his mind, since if he really was someone who defeated the Lord of the Swamp, then he could be an old mage who took the elixir of rejuvenation. At that moment, a subordinate appears, saying that all the scouts have returned. The chief remains silent, and the guy gets confused, wondering if he said something wrong. Fixer orders everyone to finish together, since they cannot keep their employer waiting any longer. He gathers everyone and announces that they are leaving. Half of them will go deeper into the great forest, and the other half will go outside. And, not wanting to drag things out, he orders them to protect Aviot's name, the names of those who were their family, as well as their masters. They shout that they will give it their all, since they are better with swords than the others. Another shouts that he may not be great with the sword, but at least he is very fast. The camp chief orders everyone to stop. That is because their discipline is far too loose. And since he does not want to see them arguing, he orders everyone to get lost. They must leave and wait for orders, because all of them will get beaten until they cannot take it anymore. The guy is saying that, but he is also crying, and at every moment, tells them to get the hell out already. Aster watches from afar and realizes how much the chief cares about his subordinates. This makes him remember someone, and he thinks that sucks. At this moment, Rayleigh appears, asking if the mercenaries are really going to accompany them. The MC answers yes, and the guy admits that he thinks that is good, but feels embarrassed, since he went over Oberon's order. Despite that, he is aware that Aviot's mercenaries are a little special, even if Oberon does not know that. They are monster hunters who have guarded the camp for almost 200 years. The MC finds it interesting, since, if they are hunters, then they know how to win. Rayleigh is aware that there should not be any monsters that would be an obstacle for the MC, but even so, the mercenaries will be a great help. Aster hopes so and tells them to pack their bags. The guide, all excited, says that he already has everything ready, but the MC says that a dead man does not need luggage. He panics and asks him not to jinx it, since he put everything in the subspace. Aster knows that all of this is to make it easier for him to escape, but Rayleigh guarantees that he will not do that anymore, and, in exchange, if they survive, only asks that he let him work for him, and, although he does not know much, he is someone who learns quickly. The MC finds it interesting, since he is betting his own life, although it is not as if the guy would find a stronger and more reliable lifeline than Aster himself. The guy could be killed by the Declan House, or end up getting involved with the Forbidden Magic Society, but it all comes down to high risk and reward. Thinking about that, he answers that it is all right. The guy thanks him and says that he will do his best, but not to the point of selling his own soul. The old man appears and says that they have already finished all the preparations, since there is no need for long farewells, but asks them to persuade someone before they leave. Aster gets excited, since he wants to see who will need to take a beating to agree to go. Fixer says that this guy is at the second base camp and asks them to go there to convince Chief Halig, and if that does not work, he would at least like to borrow the vice captain, because despite being a rude bastard, he is a brilliant strategist. Meanwhile, at the second camp, a man is on guard until he notices that the captain has arrived and greets Halig. The leader asks what the situation is. He answers that they are completely ready to go to the fourth camp and only need to empty the facilities. Halig tells him to leave it alone, because even if the goblins move into the camp, they can simply take it back. The guy thinks about this and imagines that this only applies if they come back alive. The chief asks if it does not seem a little useless. He thought he had everything when he rose to the position of leader, although the guy would not know, since he has never been at the top, and he even thinks that he needs to die soon so the vice captain can quickly take over the position. The guy asks him not to make morbid jokes with a serious face and does not know why he is suddenly acting so differently. Halig points out that he is just wanting to lament a little, since it is time to die. The vice captain is startled and asks if that means he is planning to join those bastards from Aviot. He is not sure, since, although they are together, they are going to the same place. The guy calls him crazy because the forest is full of powerful monsters, and he does not understand why mere mercenaries would try to get involved in something like that, and it does not even seem like his chief's type. The old man asks what type that would be. He answers that he is someone who looks for a big payment. Halig says that there will not only be mere mercenaries, since there will also be veteran war mages, and practically any mage worth their salt will be there with them. The vice leader keeps shouting since this is absurd, and asks him to look at the state of things because the guys are ready to desert at any moment. So he tells him to reconsider going to the fourth camp. Halig laughs, since his friend is clearly afraid of dying, and because of that, tells him to become the chief. He asks him to sit in the chief's chair at least once, and says that he does not need to inherit the name of the mercenary group. He can simply command things however he sees fit. The vice still cannot process this, and slaps his own face to see if it is real. The old man announces that, from this moment on, his friend will be the chief, and asks him to do whatever he wants with the camp's name. But before he can finish speaking, he looks down, since some lunatic has arrived stabbing him in the back. It was Kellogg shouting that farewells are touching, though he is going to send all of them to the same place. The vice leader screams for his chief and charges toward them, but Halig kicks him, making him move away from the enemy. He does not understand why, and the old man, badly wounded, smiles and tells him to live. After all, his friend is the new chief. Meanwhile, on the journey, the MC senses something in the middle of his walk and says that the place definitely has a lot of trash. The next day, they come face to face with an ogre, and the mercenaries order everyone to regroup and the chain squad to advance. The MC just watches, since he did not know that trolls and ogres were the standard in that forest. The deeper they go into the great forest, the more real monsters start appearing. The chain squad throws their weapons to bind the monster, and the disposal squad moves into action then, piercing the monster from every possible direction. Aster realizes that the group has experience, since they are clearly veterans, and thinks it is better to just observe. Fixer apologizes for the squad being a little clumsy, since they are recovering their touch little by little. Aster asks what he means by that. He explains that the older ones usually handle the chains, and the disposal squad has always been for the younger ones. Either way, he does not intend to delay the schedule. The MC observes that he was told the chains are made of ore found in the forest, and, even so, their strength and coordination are impressive. At this moment, Oberon appears, apologizing for what happened last night, since he underestimated the mercenaries. The camp chief also apologizes and tells him not to dwell on it, since no one can be perfect all the time, and it is important to learn from one's own mistakes. The boy agrees, and Fixer asks him to go help the group, since they themselves are getting old and their bodies are no longer as they should be. He says he understands, and right after that, someone shouts that they need to see something. The old man approaches and says that it is Plen. Aster asks if he knows the guy, and he answers that he is the vice captain of the second base camp, and that apparently something serious happened. They wonder what it could be, and would not be surprised if the rats were already following them and could have completely messed up the fate of the second camp. The MC warns that they need to leave immediately, and that, from that point on, he will be taking command. Right after that, a troll appears, but Aster annihilates it before it can even get close. Then Rayleigh shouts that a dragon is approaching, but the MC continues killing everything that gets close. Rayleigh suggests they go around, since there are poisonous herbs ahead, but Aster solves that by setting everything on fire. The guide tries to understand why the MC is so agitated. The captain considers that maybe he is finding it too easy, but tells him to be careful anyway. A few days later, after a long journey, Rayleigh says that they are almost at the second base camp. The MC feels that something is wrong and runs ahead. The camp chief orders all the worms to pick up the pace, since they need to run, and the group immediately obeys. As they get closer, they become more worried and near the gate, question what that strong smell is. They enter the camp and come face to face with the MC, looking at several bodies tied to the trees. Oberon questions what the hell happened, and the MC goes over to them, and upon getting close to the unconscious vice captain, slaps him in the face to wake him up. Oberon asks him to wait, since there is no need to hit him that hard, but it worked, since Plen woke up without knowing where he was. Aster says he has a question, and just wants to know what the hell happened at the camp. He finally understands that he is at his base and is shocked to see his situation. They gather the bodies so they can set them on fire, and Fixer points out that the MC can be quite cruel sometimes, since he does not see the need to wake Plen up right in front of that massacre. He answers that the guy needed to see the end of his comrades with his own eyes, but the old man does not know if that really was the right choice. The MC says yes, since he thinks it is better than keeping everything bottled up inside. Fixer finds this strange, because he feels an odd emptiness behind the MC's face, as if he had already lost countless friends before. But even so, he gets straight to the point, since he wants to know the truth about what exactly is happening and whether this has to do with the man in the black cloak that Plen mentioned. Aster answers that it does, since everything is connected, and thinks the guy is an arrogant piece of shit for sending such a blatant invitation. But that only serves to get him excited, because he is going to enter the game to put an end to that damn anti-mage. Sometime later, Fixer observes the camp from above and remembers the conversation he had with the MC, who warned that, if he did not return by the next morning, they should move on without him, but guarantees that he will catch up to them quickly. He thinks about this, since the boy is a complete mystery. Aster moves at high speed and thinks about Salvatium, the Forbidden Magic Association, and this story goes back to his past life. They were the ones who gave Prison the artifact when he was fleeing, and now they have the audacity to send him an invitation. He realizes that their persistence is unimaginable, since they have been operating in the shadows for so long, but that is just more motivation to teach them a lesson. After moving for a while, he arrives at the place and says it is the perfect day to beat someone up and asks if he does not agree. He says this to the crow that was nearby, and Kellogg gets excited by that hint. After hearing that it is a perfect day to beat someone up, he concludes that this is prey worth hunting. He squeezes a magical sphere in his hand, since everything is ready, and tells the game to begin, because the day is beautiful. The MC notices something strange, and even though everything around him appears normal, countless creatures with human bodies appear. He admits that he should feel honored, since having a familiar guide him and clear out all the monsters was easy. He barely says this before a colossal magical explosion happens at his feet. The one who kills the 13 sinners will carry the weight of all their sins. 10,000 plagues and 10,000 nightmares attacked at once, because that is the magnitude of the sins carried by the 13. He continues hearing those creatures saying that phrase while activating that magical power, and Kellogg appears, saying that he really hopes he liked the preparations he made. The MC says he loved them and charges with everything against the creatures, and, with his blood manipulation, throws his power at everyone's heads, exploding them one by one without even leaving his spot. The final target is Kellogg, but the guy summons his weapon and says he found the spell he used extremely interesting and, with his cursed scythe, tells him to scream for the sins he caused. He activates the Sin of the 13 and, with another magical sphere in his hand, activates his magic, which summons the Master of the Death Knights. His soldier awaits orders, and he tells him to capture Aster alive. He immediately obeys and advances, attacking with everything, even completely destroying the terrain with his attack. Kellogg shouts that he made it clear not to kill the target, and yet the Death Knight continues attacking with everything. This makes the guy even more furious, ordering him to stop at once, until he is startled to see Aster deflecting the sword with his fist, leaving the summon speechless, since it is facing a power it has never witnessed before. The battle continues frantically, and Kellogg cannot believe how this is possible, because that power is the Sin of the 13. It is not even magic. It is a spell of distorted power, and his target should be a miserable wreck, not untouched. Another thing giving him away is the Death Knight, since, although it cannot use all of its former power, the material was a master knight in his prime. Created from a truly heinous warrior, it is basically one of Solian's masterpieces, and yet, he is seeing the MC fight on equal footing with an aberration like that. He thinks this sucks, because his precious masterpiece is going to end up being destroyed, and decides to activate the prison curse. Several chains appear, binding Aster, and, because his movements are limited, they create an opportunity for the Death Knight to land an attack. Kellogg gets excited, since the MC was so focused on the Death Knight that he ended up being trapped and received a critical hit. And he gets thrilled, saying he will be another one for his collection. However, he is startled to see a strike approaching, one strong enough to blow up part of the forest. He realizes that he received a very strong attack, but screams in fear when he sees that both of his legs were destroyed. Aster approaches and says that the Death Knight is one thing, but a forbidden mage is another. Then, also injured, he says they will have a long conversation. He warns that there will be 3 rules. First, he must be careful with his eyes, because he would prefer him to keep his eyes fixed on his foot. Kellogg calls him a bastard, but Aster, in that same instant, pierces his eyes, and, even while hearing the screams of pain, the MC says he had been polite until now. The second rule is not to try anything funny. That is because the last guy he spared tried to attack him by surprise, and finally, he must be honest when answering the questions. He wants to know if he is alone, if the target is Death Row, and why Aster was also a target. Lastly, he lifts his shirt and asks if he has seen that magical symbol before. He imagines that the guy is a forbidden mage who practices magic that defies the natural order, so it is possible that he knows something about the stigma. Kellogg complains that he cannot see anything, so he is not sure, and the MC thinks this sucks, since the lunatic was covering his eyes, so he thought everything was fine. He does not care that much about it, since forbidden mages are known for messing with corpses, so it is better for him to answer with as much information as possible. Then he questions what Salvatium's goal is. The guy prepares to speak, but his body collapses, and he loses his life because of it. Aster wonders if the guy had some kind of restriction and feels relieved that he asked what he needed to. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. He takes a deep breath and tells everything to go to hell, since nothing goes right. Only then does he remember that the guy mentioned the 13 sins and feels relieved that the stigma retaliated when the curse activated. But he almost died trying to catch a rat. Then he looks at the Death Knight on the ground and imagines that the control over that being must be the collar on the madman's body. He tries to control the summon, and the Death Knight approaches and says he is awaiting orders. He realizes that the thing is truly gigantic when seen up close and tells him that he is free, so he should find his eternal rest. The summon says he has finally found freedom, and some magical writings begin to circle his body since the chains have been broken. The MC congratulates him and tells him they will go their separate ways. However, the knight gets his attention and says that, for a brat, he has a pretty filthy tongue. Aster asks if he is kidding and tells the old man that he is free, so he should be going to the afterlife or something like that. The thing makes it clear that if he is free, then he is choosing. Aster says he does not care about that, since he is leaving, but the knight tells him to lead the way. The MC gets even more furious, because he has seen a lot of bullshit, but that beats everything. The knight once again points out that he has a pretty filthy mouth and says he has been to the other side, so Aster should be calling him a veteran. The MC simply cannot believe what is happening and tells everything to go to hell. Morning arrives, and the MC, seeing that there is no way to get rid of the thing, says that he will be considered a master knight from a prestigious house. Shine prepares to give a history lesson, but Aster tells him to shut up, because the thing lived in Imperial Year 137, and that is way too far in the past, since they are in the year 374. The knight says he understands and asks about House Lortel and House Dolenfi and whether they still exist. Aster answers that both are fine and calls him Sir Tin Can. Shine gets irritated at being called that, and the MC realizes that he is the typical brain of a swordsman, and, although he wants to hit him, he is holding himself back, and not because he is afraid of a master knight who has regained his senses. Without dragging things out, he asks if his name really is Shine and what family he is from. The swordsman says that he has finally asked an interesting question and tries to remember, since he is not sure, until he finally remembers that his full name is Shine von Liemens, a master knight of House Liemens. The MC is speechless for a moment and asks if he is a lunatic. The man does not understand the question, and Aster thinks this is a pain because the biggest madman in history is right in front of him. That is because this guy was considered a kingslayer. He gets excited about the situation and asks if, by any chance, he would like to work together. History remembers this guy as the Kingslayer, a traitor, but he had many other titles. A genius born once in every generation, a born warrior, master of the sword and of every other weapon, and, finally, the tragic genius who went mad after the fall of House Lehman's. He thinks he will be quite the trump card, since the guy is a genius who became a master knight at 18 years old, and he needs to keep both Death Row and the Golden Mages in mind. After all, Shine is a perfect tool for his forces, or rather, a perfect ally. For that reason, he asks once again if he wants them to work together and points to the black mage who used him as a puppet, since he believes that a situation like this demands revenge. Those words leave the knight with hatred in his heart, and the MC quickly senses the intense tension, since it is as satisfying as a bowl of warm soup. In any case, Shine asks if the man is alive, because he saw the target dead. Aster points out that he was just a low-level minion, and even reveals that this guy said the famous Black Knight was nothing more than a cheap tool that, by the way, was far too weak. This drives the swordsman crazy, to the point that he guarantees he will tear apart whoever said that. Aster sees no problem with that, but says it will not be easy to find him. Shine understands that, apparently, the MC knows where the guy is. He answers that he does, and it just so happens that he also has some business to settle with that guy. But he cannot simply give that information away for free, and, once again, asks if they agree to work together. Shine thinks for a moment, and even though he feels he is being manipulated, agrees. After all, he intended to follow Aster for a while anyway. They finally reach an agreement, and the MC says that he needs to return to his comrades. Sometime later, he arrives at the camp, and Fixer says he is happy to see him, but gets startled and asks who the suspicious-looking big guy with him is. The MC tells him to stop trying to intimidate him, while also calling everyone, including Plen. That is because he has something to say. After everyone gathers, he asks if they at least rested well at night. Rayleigh answers that he barely did, because he was killing himself from working so much. Aster remembers that the guy stayed on alert because he took a few knocks to the head and notices Plen's bloodlust, since he is practically dripping venom. Because of that, he tells him not to get all grumpy just because he took a few beatings, and makes it clear that if he keeps glaring like that, he will make a hole in his head. Then, he begins his explanation of why he disappeared last night. After the entire explanation, the camp chief asks if he understood correctly, because the creature in front of them is a Death Knight who reached the level of Master. Aster tells him to take off the hood, and Shine shows his true appearance as a Death Knight. Oberon calls out to the MC and points out that a Death Knight is a cursed monster, and he does not understand how he could walk together with a creature like that. He asks what the problem with that is, and whether their solution is just to cut off the knight's head just because he is a cursed monster. Shine even jokes, because cutting off his head will not kill him. The MC sees that Oberon is still not confident about it and tells him to fight Shine. He points out that the guy is a knight who reached the level of Master in his past life, and even if they call him a cursed monster, they have no idea how many mercenaries that so-called monster is worth by himself. The boy is left speechless, and the Death Knight interrupts and says that he was originally a loyal knight of the Emperor, and even after becoming cursed, his heart remained unchanged. That said, he asks if he knows the agony of a soul transformed into an undead. Even at that moment, he is feeling pain, and, although not through his flesh, it feels like a flame is consuming his entire being. Then, he takes his sword and says that he remains the proud sword of the Emperor. However, a black mage insulted his loyalty, and for a knight whose loyalty was profaned, that is an unreal pain. That is the only reason he remains standing, which is revenge against that guy. He hands over his sword, since he is still not being seen as someone trustworthy, and asks him to bring him down using that weapon. He also swears on the honor of his being that he will die by his hands. Oberon hears those words and starts crying, since he is so unworthy and knew nothing of his pain, and yet he was still so narrow-minded. Then he continues crying on Shine's shoulder, while the knight looks at the MC, since he resolved that situation easily. Aster finds this drama pathetic, since that is not the Emperor's sword, but rather the sword that decapitated the Emperor. Sometime later, night arrives, and everyone gathers outside because they need to prepare. Although Aster has kept the details about the Golden Mages and Salvatium a secret, everyone is now aware of the existence of a new enemy. The schedule will not be very flexible from this moment on, and they will have to move forward with their own convictions, some to survive, some for justice, others for family, and others for revenge. As for himself, Before he can finish, the Death Knight wants to pass through since he is blocking the way. Returning to his reflection, the MC does not know exactly how it will be, but he knows it will be somehow. That's all, folks. If you enjoy the video, subscribe and hit the bell. Thanks.